Chapter 2449. When Jin Xian revealed a gentle smile and reached out to touch her face. There were still traces of makeup on it. He wanted to draw her eyebrows and dress her up, but she was unwilling and made a fuss for a long time. His fingertips slid across the lotus petals between her eyebrows. The spiritual energy of the petals imprisoned her spirit meridians. She couldn't cultivate on her own and could only be maintained in the shaky foundation establishment stage. Her fingers gripped his clothes tightly. There were still traces on her fingertips. He calmly held her fingers and put her on the bed. Wei Wei Bai trembled as if she was afraid. When Jin Xian traced her face and gently touched her hair, tangling his fingers in it. Wei Wei, do you still want to escape? A trace of fear appeared in Wei Wei Bai's eyes. She hurriedly shook her head and revealed a stiff smile. Why would I escape? I like Master so much. The little fox was extremely pitiful. Her eyes were watery, and every time she was in pain, she would cry. She scolded him as she cried. The more she scolded him, the more pitiful she seemed. When Jin Xian's eyes were calm and deep, but under this calmness, there were extremely twisted and demonic emotions. His voice was as beautiful as a clear spring. Since you like it, then live well with Master. In the beginning, he just wanted to live well with her. She was unwilling. He just spent a little more effort to break her hands and feet and build a cage. When the little fox heard this, her voice trembled with anticipation. If I live well with Master, can I go out? When Jin Xian stared at her beautiful and charming face. During this period of time, she had really become more and more beautiful. She shouldn't be cultivating immortality like this. Perhaps the one who was more powerful than her. He wanted to capture her as a furnace and torture her to death. He just couldn't bear to part with her. Otherwise, she would have been a furnace long ago. This world was too willful and flamboyant. People who wantonly squandered their beauty. They couldn't live well. That was why he locked her up to protect her. When Jin Xian's smile deepened, his fingers were gentle but didn't allow her to resist as he pushed her onto the bed. Sure, wait until Wei Wei learns how to love before going out. Wei Wei Bai's voice immediately trembled as she revealed a fawning smile. Master, I love you. When Jin Xian's eyes narrowed and his body stiffened, the gentle smile on his face froze. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up. She softened her voice and said sweetly, I love you, husband. These words were obviously fake, but it made when Jin Xian's emotions surge. He looked at her for a long time and finally smiled warmly. I love you too. I love you so much that I wish I could kill you. The feelings that he cherished were just lies that she could casually use as a tool. How could someone be so hateful? Ding, the male lead's blackening value is 97. Ever since he discovered a new way to torture people. Wei Wei Bai confessed every day, no matter how badly she was abused. She anxiously used her weak hands to wrap around the strong man. Master, I love you so much. Master, your eyes are so beautiful. They're like gems. I love you more and more every day. Husband, you'll be my husband for life. Loving you is the meaning of my life. What a cheesy way of saying sweet things. Awkwardly sweet mode activated. At first, when Jin Xian could still look at her as a joke. But gradually, the look in his eyes changed. After all, the little fox's gentleness and active adoration were too passionate. She was much more passionate than when she first pursued him. He clearly knew that it was fake. It was fake. The little fox called out sweetly again, Husband, when Jin Xian finally raised his irritable and dark eyes. He could no longer pretend to be gentle and said coldly, Shut up. Wei Wei Bai smiled. You look the best in the world when you're angry. I love you even more. One Jin Xian, for the 1000th time, he wanted to strangle her. How could someone make use of their feelings so thoroughly? No matter how much pain he made her feel, she could use all her strength to say that she loved him. Over and over again. Did she have to torture him in this way? Wei Wei Bai, yes, master. Her weak hand grabbed his hair. Her beautiful face was so innocent that it was cruel. Husband, I love you so much. Are you happy? When Jin Xian, Wei Wei Bai, I love you so much. When can we go out? One Jin Xian, ding, the male lead's blackening value is 99. Chapter 2450. The system, who was chewing on a small biscuit, felt that this blackening value was purely caused by Wei Wei Bai's disgust. So, be it if you want to torture people. You don't deserve a beating. Anyway, with the painkiller, the host acted recklessly. That pretentious strength was not something a normal person could bear. No, the system looked at Wen Jinqian's handsome face with a look of despair. Even if it was the abnormal Wen Jinqian, he was also tortured enough. The host stepped on Wen Jinqian's most painful place and stomped her feet desperately. She also added chili and cumin and roasted it. Wei Wei Bai lay in the lotus. In the pool of demonic energy and immortal energy, the lotus buds bloomed. She narrowed her eyes expressionlessly. Her eyelashes were wet, but her eyes were extremely cold. Her hands and feet were weak. Originally, there was one hand that was normal, but I said I love you too many times. In the end, Wen Jinqian grimaced and broke the meridians of her good hand, and she was so angry that she bit his neck. His skin was obviously very tough, but when she bit it, it was hard to resist. He deliberately softened his body and let her teeth sink into his skin as she wished. In the end, Wei Wei Bai's lips were bloody. She laughed even more desperately and crazily than him. The resentment in her eyes was cold to the bone, but it made the beautiful girl look even more like a blood-soaked demon, seductive. Her delicate lips curled up slightly, revealing a beautiful smile. "Master, I really love you so much." The hatred in her words, with desperate malice, was wrapped in words of love. He couldn't kill her. He couldn't win against her. As she said, "What did you love me have to do with me?" How much he loved her. She dared to use so much malice and viciousness to torture him with this love. The two of them had been torturing each other for more than half a year, and the last bit of blackening value, it was still stuck. However, the old monster's temperament was very patient. Maybe the blackening value had already gone up, but because she endured it, it didn't go up. Maybe one day the blackening value would automatically be full. Wei Wei Bai lies in the pool, allowing the lotus flowers to approach her. She exuded a gentle and humble aura. Lotus both loved and feared her. Wen Jinqian was dressed in a messy and lazy black robe. He lay by the side of the pool and looked at the girl's pale and alluring face. His half-closed eyes hid the darkness. Wei Wei Bai's expression was incomparably indifferent, as if she had lost her spirit. Even her ears were stuck in her silver hair. If it wasn't for him tormenting her too much, she was too lazy to say that she loved him. Every time he hurt her, she would hold on to his pain and not let go even if she died. She had learned how to perish together with the enemy quite quickly. Wen Jinqian reached out and gently stroked her hair. The little fox's ears twitched, but she couldn't be bothered with him. She was tired. She didn't even have the strength to torture him. If it wasn't for him, she wouldn't have been able to climb out of the pool. Wen Jinqian asked gently, "Do you want to go out?" Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered for a moment before she laughed in an indescribably sarcastic manner. Her voice was hoarse. "Go out for what? I'll just watch, Master. No matter how beautiful this world is, it can't compare to a single strand of my master's hair." Because she was tired, she didn't have the energy to be resentful and sarcastic. She actually seemed a little sincere. Sincere. When Jinqian smiled, mocking himself for having such a childish imagination. She was only starting to hate him half-heartedly, whether it was hate or love. They both required energy. During this period of time, he might have squeezed all the energy out of her resentment. Chapter 2451. When Jinqian looked at her quietly, his deep red eyes sparkling. His pale fingertips touched a lotus flower beside him unhurriedly. The young man looked down tiredly, and a lotus flower rubbed against his fingertips as if comforting him. However, he slowly pinched his fingertips and crushed the petals, letting them fall into the pool. The girl in the pool trembled again, and her pale face turned a little red. She immediately looked up and stared at him. The young man's thin lips curled into a cold smile, but there was no trace of smile in his clear red eyes. When the lotus flower fell, it was the erosion of power. Of course, she would feel pain soaking in the pool. Unfortunately, She didn't care about physical pain anymore. After all, he couldn't bear to let her suffer so much pain that she broke down. It was just a little coercion. In the end, he didn't go too far. Even when he broke her arms and legs, he immediately sealed her spiritual aura to treat her pain. After all, she was in so much pain. He also felt terrible when Jin Xian got up unhurriedly and reached into the pool. His wide sleeves were soaked. However, he didn't care at all. Instead, he held the delicate Wei Wei by in his arms. He carefully held her as if he was holding a peerless treasure. He was still gentle. After soaking in the lotus pool, you can at least move your arms and legs. You can also walk. As long as you don't run, you'll be fine. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and said sharply, "Aren't you afraid that I'll run away? It's better for my arms and legs to be broken. Otherwise, how can I make my husband's fragile and suspicious heart feel at ease? I love you so much, of course I have to think about you." When Jin Xian stopped in his tracks and looked down at her, under his beautiful eyelashes, his red eyes were strangely gentle. He pursed his lips and revealed a calm smile. "Since you said so, then it's just a little more effort for me to break your arms again." She was willful and irritable. He was deranged. What a perfect match for a scholar and a beauty. Wei Wei Bai immediately cowered. She weakly rubbed against his skin and acted coquettishly like a cat. "Master, you should save some energy for other things." The meaning of these words stunned Wen Jinxian, and his ears turned red. Then, he calmly suppressed the heat in his eyes. Her body couldn't take it anymore. Wei Wei Bai wore a lotus dress and held a rabbit lantern in her hand. A rare happy smile appeared on her face. Her silver curls were tied up in two lovely braids with red ribbons, and a few strands of silver curls fell to the sides of her face. There was a hint of laziness and casualness. Wen Jinxian was also in white, but his red eyes were red. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. It was the Lantern Festival. The world was bustling. There were people and beautiful lights everywhere. The little fox seemed very curious. She held the rabbit lantern and asked with a smile, "Shurzuan, what are they doing?" Wen Jinxian stared at her for a while before saying in a hoarse voice, "When you're making a wish, put the note into the lamp and into the river, and your wish will come true." Wei Wei Bai said with a smile, "People are really good at deceiving themselves. If you throw a lamp into the water, it will only sink. How can it fulfill your wish?" Wen Jinxian was silent for a moment. Then, he smiled as if he was mocking himself. Yeah, people are really used to lying to themselves, even if it was a wish that couldn't be fulfilled. He also did everything he could to obtain it. Wasn't he just lying to him? The little fox suddenly went to the fortune teller's stall and found a pen and paper. Then, he wrote a wish and stuffed it into the rabbit lantern. Then, he threw it into the water. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. /crossover system, Adonis, come here. / crossover system, Adonis, come here. Download crossover system, Adonis, come here. Mobile crossover system, Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 2452. The lantern followed the thousands of lights and floated forward. When Jinxian's eyelashes fluttered. "No, you don't want to deceive yourself." Wei Wei Bai smiled brightly and was extremely carefree. "Yes, I'm just playing." With that, she turned around to leave. When Jinxian stood there in a daze. Then he gently raised his hand and the rabbit lantern returned from the water. It reappeared in his hand. Wei Wei Bai turned around and raised her eyebrows. "Why did Master bring it back?" When Jinxian said unhurriedly, "I wanted to see what your wish was. I can fulfill it for you." Wei Wei Bai's smile froze a little. Then she snorted. "What else could it be? Of course, it's to love Master forever." The gentle smile on Wen Jinxian's face disappeared. He held the lantern and felt like an ugly monster who was entertaining her. At this time, she still didn't forget to torture him. The wish hidden in the lantern was to leave him. When Jinxian took out the note, but held it in his hand. In the end, he didn't open it and casually stuffed it into his sleeve pocket. After all, he already knew that this wish couldn't be fulfilled. Opening it would only make it more embarrassing. The little fox's legs were inconvenient. After walking for a long time, she began to slow down. She faintly endured the pain in her ankle. The lotus petals between her eyebrows became more delicate, and her forehead was full of sweat. He originally wanted to endure until she begged for mercy. When Jinxian pressed on her thin shoulders. When the youth lowered his head and stared at her, his red eyes were gentle and calm. He had always been rational and restrained. Even if he was possessed, he was still so tolerant. "Come, I'll carry you." Bai Weiwei frowned and sneered. "Fake kindness, hypocrite." These words could no longer hurt him as long as they didn't say that they loved him. To him, any words were like heavenly sounds. After all, the little fox's voice was indeed soft, sweet, and seductive. Although she disliked it, Weiwei Bai still lay on when Jinxian's back and lazily rested her chin on his hard shoulder. Her warm breath blew into his ear. "Master, how long can you live?" When Jinxian's footsteps seemed slow, but he was as fast as a shadow in the crowd. The flood of people in the world seemed to be the background of this elegant young man. His tone was indifferent and slightly hoarse. Let's look at the heavenly Tao. The ninth bolt of tribulation lightning did not descend. It wasn't just his obsession. The power of the heavenly Tao was brewing, and he had committed a great taboo. When he entered the demonic state to block the lightning and fell into the abyss, for some reason, the power of the lightning tribulation was weakened. In the eyes of the heavenly Tao, he had obtained the immortal meridian through trickery. This was a great taboo for lightning tribulations. The last bolt of lightning was probably going to destroy his soul. That was why the heavenly Tao had been accumulating power all this time. One Jinxian swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. If she knew, she would only be happy. After all, if she really failed at the last lightning tribulation, he wouldn't be able to lock her up anymore. She must be happy. The possessed one Jinxian tilted his head and thought for a moment. There was a hint of adorable hesitation on his face. Why don't I hold her and block the lightning tribulation together, just like the previous few times? In that case, if he died, she would have to be with him. Her soul would be destroyed, and she would never be reincarnated. This thought appeared a few times. When she hurt him the most, she always thought this way. But when she hugged him and curled up into a ball, looking exceptionally pitiful and cute, he also felt reluctant. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 97. A question mark appeared above Weiwei Bai's head. / Chapter 2453. It was fine if when Jinxian's favorability didn't drop after being tortured to this extent, but his favorability actually increased. Was when Jinxian so tortured that he turned stupid? Forget it. It wasn't like there weren't masochists. She had seen too many of them, so she wasn't surprised. Weiwei Bai lay on one Jinxian's back and was carried by him to see many beautiful scenes of the Lantern Festival. It was rare for her to come out, so she didn't mess around. Instead, she quietly hugged when Jinxian's neck, her breath rubbing against his cheek, as if they hadn't fallen out before. Obedient and gentle. One Jinxian's thick black eyelashes drooped slightly, covering the flickering emotions in his red eyes. He liked it when she was so obedient, so it was rare that he didn't immediately return to Jiutian. Suddenly, the young man heard the little fox's muttering voice. "Master, you're actually going to die, right?" When Jinxian's footsteps faltered for a moment, he glanced sideways at her. Her beautiful side profile gave off a calm and exquisite feeling under the light. The little fox still didn't know what was good for her. Even a person who has turned into a demon can't survive the last tribulation. I flipped through the book. "You're definitely going to die." Was this another way to anger him? When Jinxian looked ahead indifferently and said calmly, "Yes, I'm going to die. Is Weiwei happy?" Weiwei Bai was silent for a moment. This silence seemed so solemn. He seemed to have sensed something and his heart trembled. But before he could think about it carefully, he still heard the little fox teasing him. "I love Master so much. If you really die, I can't die for love." When Jinxian wasn't angry anymore, he sighed and said gently, "You always know how to make me angry. You don't have to die for love. Before I die, I'll torture you to death in bed." The little fox behind him stiffened, although it was only for a moment, but still made when Jinxian smile. It seemed that she was still afraid. She wasn't so lawless and heartless. Wen Jinxian lost interest in strolling around. His red eyes showed a twisted passion, and the demon that couldn't be suppressed appeared again. Let's go back. His voice was hoarse and magnetic, making people's scalps go numb. Wei Wei Bai seemed to know what he was thinking. She sneered, "Beast." Under his beautiful eyelashes, Wen Jinxian's red eyes seemed to be stained with blood. Yeah, he's only a beast away, Wei. Wei Wei Bai laid lazily on his shoulder and narrowed her foxy eyes. That depends on whether you're still alive. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly disappeared. The sound of world-ending thunder gathered in the sky, shaking the heavens and earth. In the dark sky, the ferocious dark clouds were stirring. The thunder tribulation transformed into a huge thunder dragon wagging its tail. The final tribulation of the immortal formation realm, helping people become immortals. Demonic soul powder, demon crossing, and bone changing. When Jinxian was now a demon, his soul was destined to scatter. However, the white-robed youth did not look at the sky. He stood in the storm and looked up at Wei Wei Bai, who was standing not far away. The little fox's ears popped out. She sat cross-legged and looked at him with a smile. "Master, you gave me power, and I've used it to attract lightning for you. Are you happy?" 70% of Wen Jinxian's power. She released all of it, and the crazy power rushed into Wen Jinxian's body. He regained the strength of a peak youth. However, this also exposed his position and attracted the last thunder tribulation. Wen Jinxian stood quietly in the countless small lightning bolts. The lotus between his eyebrows was abnormally red. The thunder tribulation rolled in the sky. Countless lightning tentacles fell to the ground, cutting his skin. Wen Jinxian did not seem to see it. He still stood in the same place, his white robe billowing. Time seemed to have stopped in his eyes. Under his long and beautiful eyelashes, his pair of dark red eyes were filled with deep affection. He stared at Wei Wei Bai just like that. "Do you want me to die that much?" Wen Jinxian's tone was terrifyingly calm. Among the countless lightning tentacles, he heard the little fox's innocent and casual voice. "Why would I want you to die? I love you, husband." Wen Jinxian was silent for a while. The lightning tentacles rubbed against his cheeks, and the blood flowed like tears. So, it was just forcing it from the beginning. His delicate and sad face finally twisted in despair. Everything was because of his insistence. Ding, the male lead's blackening value is 100. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 2454. She heard that the blackening value was 100. Wei Wei Bai was so touched that she wanted to go back immediately. If it weren't for the 3 points of favorability left, she would have killed herself immediately. Because if she was caught by Wen Jinxian, who had a blackening value of 100, the scene would be too beautiful. She didn't dare to imagine. Wei Wei Bai felt that she wouldn't just break her arms and legs next. Wen Jinxian would probably take out 100 textbooks of the top 10 torture methods and experiment on her one by one. She was about to get up when a few thunder tentacles fell beside her. There was an explosion. Some broken stones smashed toward her body. Although she was now at the foundation establishment stage, her body was actually worse than a normal mortal's. Because when Jinxian had emptied it, Wei Wei Bai was about to roll away when a pair of hands happened to catch her. The fingers were white and slender, so strong that they wanted to crush her bones. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She looked up and saw that she was already in Wen Jinxian's arms. The young man's face was calm and cold, but the blood on the wound on his cheek was horrifying. His pair of dark red eyes were not clear, only the coldness of an endless abyss. Wen Jinxian lowered his head and pressed his cold forehead against the little fox's forehead. In a violent vortex of power, the young man was like a beautiful and gentle lover. His ink-black hair was spread out, his eyelashes were lowered, and his eyes were endless. The deep blood color had lost all the warmth that belonged to humans. In his eyes, there was still only her shadow. The girl's face was pale, but there was no trace of ridicule in her eyes. Instead, there was a trace of confusion and softness. Even because of the danger around them, she stayed in his arms obediently, not daring to go anywhere. Jinxian maintained this beautiful position of hugging her with his forehead pressed against hers for a while. Then he finally sighed. Do you know, if it weren't for the fact that the Tao technique I cultivate is heartless and heartless, I would have completely lost my mind and torn you apart. His demonic thoughts had entered his bones. If it were anyone else, they would have completely lost their mind and gone crazy. He was also on the verge of a mental breakdown. But because she was by his side, at least he had a trace of obsession to protect her and held on. And this trace of rationality was an ability that he had gained from cultivating the emotionless Tao art for 700 years. The last time he was bedeviled, his Tao wasn't deep enough. He had trapped the entire town and used it as a sacrificial offering after he had turned into a demon. But this time, the sacrifice was her. The corners of Jinxian's mouth twitched helplessly, but he couldn't smile. Before the madness swallowed his reason, he said, "I'll let you go." He still loved her. His reluctance to part with her seemed to come from the depths of his soul. Jinxian had never thought that he would lose to a fox like this. Love was difficult. The heavens wanted him to undergo the tribulation, but the lightning tribulation was actually an extra one. She was the tribulation that was the saddest for him. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 98. As soon as the notification sounded, she saw the lifeless look in Jinxian's eyes. A golden light appeared on his finger. It was a teleportation array. Jinxian's lips were close to her ear. His breath was cold, but his words were hot. I'll give you all the things I left behind. With these, you'll be able to establish yourself in the immortal cultivation world. Don't lie to others like this in the future. I'm the one who treats you well. He wanted to say, will you miss me in the future? But that was too humble. This wasn't something Jinxian should say. In the end, the youth just pursed his lips helplessly. The red in his eyes was stained with a few traces of moisture. Then he reached out and pressed her shoulder, just as he was about to push her into the array. Next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it, if you like. Chapter 2455. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have finally come to her senses. She hurriedly hugged him. Her movements were too hasty, and the red ribbons flew apart. Her silver curly hair also scattered all over Jinxian's body. Her fingers gripped his collar tightly, and her nails even scratched the skin on his neck with too much force. Jinxian looked at her quietly, helpless and mocking. Did she think that it was too easy for him to die like this? How else did she want to torture him? In the end, he heard the little fox in his arms say in a trembling voice, "Master, I was wrong. I won't lie to you in the future. Please forgive me." Jinxian's ink-black hair fluttered. His white robe was torn apart, and cracks began to appear on his skin. It was the power of a huge lightning strike that began to descend. But not a single trace of power fell on the little fox. He was silent for a moment before smiling. "Don't be afraid. I won't kill you." Really? Was she afraid that he would kill her? His little fox was really greedy for life and afraid of death. Then, he let go without hesitation. Wei Wei Bai was thrown into the teleportation array by him. His eyes were as red as blood, his ink-black hair was messy, and his thin lips curved slightly. "No, you'd better keep lying to me. At least I can hear you say that you love me." Wei Wei Bai stretched out her fingers. Something was wrapped around her fingertips, and she suddenly held his wrist. It was a clear scar on the young man's fair wrist. It was the mark left behind when he pulled out the threads of love. When Wei Wei Bai fell into the air and was about to land in front of the golden teleportation array, that slender red thread wrapped around his hand again. It was the same place as last time. It directly seeped into his wound. It reached his bones and entered his soul. He loved her, so he had no resistance to the threads of love. Wei Wei Bai used the threads of love to tie him up again. When they first opened their eyes, Their entanglement of love was an unexpected small mistake. But now, it was the result of her painstaking efforts and painstaking efforts. The threads of love were intertwined. Their souls and auras were intertwined. Then, the lightning would misunderstand that she and he were the same person. When Jinxian's pupils constricted, he wanted to break the relationship, but it was too late. Time seemed to slow down. All the images shattered into thousands of light spots. The little fox disappeared into the transfer array, and the lightning that was about to fall hesitated. She seemed to wonder why when Jinxian had become two people. When one Jinxian sensed that something was wrong, the lightning tribulation disappeared. The dark clouds dispersed, and the thick thunder dragon ran off to God knows where. He was at a loss for a moment. After all, this was something that had never happened in the cultivation world before. After the lightning tribulation appeared, it disappeared halfway, and he didn't feel like he had passed the lightning tribulation. The traces left behind by the lightning tribulation seemed to have seen something and chased after it. He was the one who had to transcend the tribulation. When Jinxian's messy black hair fell across his chest, his white robe was tattered and disheveled under the dark sky. The elegant young man seemed unusually lonely. He suddenly realized something and slowly blinked his slightly confused eyes. Then, he lowered his head and looked at the love thread on his wrist. Chapter 2456. The spiritual light was like a sharp blade that suddenly pierced into his brain. When Jinxian's calm and blank expression suddenly changed. The lightning tribulation did not disappear, but the person chasing had changed. Love entered her soul, and her soul was stained with his aura. The more he loved her, the more his aura was on her soul. So much so that even the lightning tribulation recognized the wrong person. A huge teleportation array appeared under their feet, and when Jinxian had disappeared, Wei Wei Bai was trembling. Fuck, this lightning is too strong. The lightning dragon followed her. When Jinxian's teleportation array teleported her thousands of miles away, he was afraid that the lightning tribulation would affect her. This also caused the lightning tribulation's reaction to be a little slow, and it took some time to catch up. Of course, the lightning dragon was not an idiot. It had its own navigation system, and it was a professional with a recognition system. Even as she tied up when Jinxian with love, it was tainted with his soul aura. She still couldn't fool the lightning tribulation, but the supermarket products could. She endured the pain and spent 20 life points to buy something that could change soul aura for 10 minutes. Now, when Jinxian's soul was filled with her soul aura, and her soul aura was when Jinxian's. The lightning tribulation recognized people based on soul aura. After all, no matter how awesome the cultivation world was, no one had invented something that could change soul aura. So the lightning tribulation was tricked and chased after Wei Wei Bai. This plane cost a little too much. She could only go back and bite Yi Yuxuan. If it weren't for Yi Yuxuan, she estimated that when she conquered the plane, she wouldn't have died from failure, but from poverty. Fortunately, she had a golden thigh, so she could scrape some life points from her life points to squander. The system glanced at the aggressive lightning dragon. It also sighed. It's really thick. If it was a human, his abs would probably be 180. Wei Wei Bai, is that still a human? Not a centipede? She said. Is when Jinxian here? There were only 2 points of favorability left. She was waiting to solve the misunderstanding and help him block the lightning tribulation. Then he could go straight home and soar. The system looked around. It's here, it's here. You can start preparing for the drama class. Wei Wei Bai quickly rubbed her face. It wasn't easy to become a drama queen. She felt that her face had developed muscles. Otherwise, how could she cope with so many expressions? If eyes could win a prize. When her eyes were acting, she could probably win an Academy Award every year. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath, straightened her back, and finally said, "Okay, undo it." Her aura was hidden. However, when Jinxian's soul aura was hers. Therefore, Lei Long couldn't find anyone to attack. She unraveled the aura of Wen Jinxian's soul. Lei Long immediately discovered the huge black cloud vortex had condensed above Wei Wei Bai's head. The surrounding wind turned into sharp knives. They attacked her with all their might. She felt as if she was standing in the eye of a terrible typhoon on the verge of collapse. When one Jinxian rushed over, he saw a petite and fragile girl, raising her neck as if she was offering a sacrifice. Her delicate and slender neck had already been injured by the wind. Fine beads of blood scattered and were blown away by the wind. It hurt so much that she trembled. A huge thunder dragon poked its head out from the sky. The ninth immortal tribulation struck with an incomparably terrifying pressure, looking down on the weak human world. Lightning intertwined, turning the dark sky into a terrifying day. Wei Wei Bai, who was in the middle, had no ability to block this lightning tribulation at all. To read the full article at https://www.sashu.com//. To read on your phone, https://m/sashu.com. Chapter 2457. With her body's condition, the lightning tribulation didn't land. Her body was destroyed, and her soul was shattered and disappeared. The little fox, at the Foundation establishment stage, was far from the lightning dragon in terms of strength. Wen Jinxian wanted to get close to her at all costs, but they were too far away. His teleportation array was blocked by the power of the lightning tribulation. He was isolated from the center of the lightning tribulation. Once the lightning tribulation began, no one was in the middle of it. They would be automatically isolated. He was just at the edge of the lightning tribulation's power, and the huge lightning seal made it difficult for him to move. When Jinxian drilled into the periphery of the seal, his body bathed in blood, his eyes confused and sad. He didn't understand. He didn't understand why the person standing in the middle of the lightning tribulation was the little fox. Didn't she hate him? When the threads of love entered his soul, he found that the aura of his soul had changed. He didn't know how she did it. She could actually exchange the aura of the two people. But later on, he realized that she was going to block the lightning tribulation for him. Why did she block it for him? There was a vague answer that was rolling in his heart, but he didn't dare to believe it. Step by step, he resisted the power of the lightning dragon outside the immortal tribulation. Just like that, his slender body walked towards the center. Every step was consuming his life. His footprints were bloody, but the lightning dragon had been waiting for too long, and it rushed down recklessly. Amidst the loud sound of thunder, he saw the little fox suddenly turn around, her silver curly hair flying in a beautiful arc. Her round eyes were filled with a determined light. As if she didn't expect to see him, a moving smile finally appeared on her calm face. As if seeing him for the last time was the happiest thing for her. This smile was so bright and pure that it made people's hearts tremble. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 99. Wen Jinxian quickened his steps and pounced towards her with all his strength. But Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back, stretched out her hands, and raised her head to meet the knot that should have belonged to him. When Jinxian finally roared, Wei Wei Bai, why? Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered. Her light-colored eyes had a beautiful luster as she tilted her head to look at him. Then, she revealed a cute smile. What else could it be? Of course it's because I love you, Master. The thunder tribulation fell in the white light. The spiritual energy of the earth boiled up, and the air exploded with an unimaginable light and sound. It was the sound of boundless spiritual energy colliding with the enormous lightning tribulation. When Jinxian no longer looked like a human, his face was covered in blood, and he finally reached out to grab her arm. He wanted to protect her. The wood-type spiritual chi seized the vitality of the earth. Even if the life force of this place was exhausted, he also had to protect her. A smile of relief appeared on his face as he grasped her wrist. There was still time. He hugged her. Even if the target of the lightning tribulation was her, he still had the strength to block all the damage and keep her safe. But by the time he realized that something was wrong, it was too late. The little fox's wrist began to dissipate. Her body was too fragile. The collision between the thunder tribulation and the spiritual energy crushed her fragile body. Wei Wei Bai looked at him gently. Her body began to disperse. When Jin Xian stared at her blankly, the scene seemed to freeze. Everything about her turned into specks of light in his eyes. And in his incomplete sleeve was the piece of paper that she had made a wish. It was swept out by the wind. The ink-colored words were graceful and beautiful. Written on it were the most beautiful words in the world. I wish that my master will no longer love me and will happily become an immortal. In the future, he will think of me occasionally. Who asked me to be cute? I'm cute. The cute tone could almost be imagined as the little fox's crafty and smiling appearance. Master, I'm so cute. It's true. Unfortunately, you don't believe me. When Jinxian heard that his heart was satisfied for a moment. She loved him, but his heart was broken again. He lost her. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 100. // To facilitate your next reading, you can click on Chapter 2458. Blackening value, 100. Favorability, 100. Both the side and main missions were completed. Ha ha. Ha my ass. The time of the strategy was pending. It was actually pending. So Wei Bai and the system squatted in the dark. They stared at the shining time of the strategy on the screen. Finally, Wei Bai rubbed her face and felt that life was so hopeless. What do we do? How long will it be pending? The system also rubbed its face and sighed. Maybe we'll be unpending soon. The undetermined time of attack was from the previous plane. So Wei Bai and the system were not familiar with it. Plus, the strategy time was not very important to them. Wei Bai was so excited about the strategy that she did not even think about the pending time. She would never be so careless in the past. It was because she was cute in the beginning that her brain went blank. In the end, she finally stopped being cute and became a flirtatious bitch. Although her brain did not go blank, she forgot a lot of details. Also, that old pervert Wen Jinxian really tormented her too much, causing her to be weak and her brain not working well. She was so happy that both the side and main missions were completed and she could go back happily. In the end, she was locked in a little black room with the system. Without a body, only her soul was left, staring at a bright screen. The bright time on the screen was pending. If the time was pending, she would have to stay here forever. What to do? Don't ask. If you ask again, you will die. Bai Weiwei's face was haggard. Don't tell me. I'm going to stay here forever, all alone and dark. The system said, don't you still have me? Wei Bai said, if I want to accompany you forever, I'd rather be alone. The system, do you still want feelings? What are you talking about? Suddenly, a light spot appeared in the darkness, and a gentle breeze blew. There was wind and light. It was the exit. Wei Bai immediately jumped up. Hey, there's an exit. We can go back. God knows how long they have been chatting here. One would get tired of just chatting and watching the Calabash brothers. She had spent so much of her life points in this immortal cultivation plane. She wouldn't go and get some life points from Yi Yuxuan. She felt uneasy. How much she missed her real life. Life points. The system felt that something was amiss. It looked at the time, and it was still waiting. He immediately said, the time is still to be determined. Pending meant that he couldn't return to reality. Even if there was an exit, it didn't mean that he could return to reality. However, Wei Bai ran away happily in the form of a white fog. Who cares? It's good to go out and take a look. Aren't you tired of staying here? If she didn't bask in the sun, she would be lacking calcium. Then, Wei Bai stepped out of the light, and he couldn't see anything clearly. It was still dark. I'll peel off your entire family. Furthermore, it wasn't just darkness. She also felt a bone-breaking pain. Kacha, kacha, kacha. Bones were broken and then reconnected. Wei Bai, the rich, exotic fragrance gave her goosebumps. The fragrance of the lotus was especially strong. However, this fragrance that was 10 times more concentrated smelled more like a biological weapon. Wei Bai finally asked, what's going on? The system, you've become a lotus root. Wei Bai, the system was afraid that the host's knowledge was lacking, so it explained, Jia, right? After he committed suicide, didn't he change into a lotus root avatar and continue his killing spree? Your husband also changed into a lotus root avatar for you. He's currently summoning your soul. // / to facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button. Chapter 2459. Wei Wei Bai. So, I returned to Jinqian's side? No. Didn't he become an immortal? The ninth bolt of Xian Lei could not kill Jinqian. No matter how disgusting Jinqian's method was, the Xian Lei could only accept it. Who asked him to withstand the ninth bolt of Xian Lei? Did she become an immortal with Jinqian? The system pondered for a while, then tried to explain in more common words. He changed his fate. Wei Wei Bai how? The system. He removed most of his immortal meridians and connected them directly to the lotus root, planning to raise you. Wei Wei Bai. Why did it sound a little vicious? What was going on? The system. Because most of his immortal meridians were removed, he was not qualified to be Soar. But it's okay, he was the first Soar to withstand the 9 heavens Xian Lei in 10,000 years. So, even if he is now a disabled immortal, he is still a super powerful big boss on the road of immortal cultivation. The kind of big boss that everyone who met had to bow their heads and respectfully call Senior Qianxian. After all, he killed a Mahayana cultivator. Now, in the cultivation world, only those 2 crooked melons and broken dates were left. Jinqian was still walking sideways. No, there was still a Mahayana cultivator who had just advanced. It was Su San who had been tortured by Jinqian for a long time and was kicked out of the Heavenly Gate sect. He had cultivated to the Mahayana stage. Sure enough, suffering was the best way for a person to grow. His cultivation level rose as fast as leaks. Wei Wei Bai listened to the system's words and felt that Jinqian seemed to have become stupid. He was quite stupid. Under the 9 heavens Xian Lei, normal people would know that her soul had been scattered. She only dared to do that because the system could protect her soul. Jinqian should also know. She cannot grow. She even took out most of her immortal meridians to raise the lotus root. No matter what, she still could not move, as if she was restrained somewhere. Occasionally, only cracking sounds could be heard. Finally, one day, a low, hoarse, but strangely familiar voice sounded softly. There are too many roots. Let me help you trim them. Wei Wei Bai. He felt like he had turned into a sweet potato. Jinqian's voice penetrated the darkness, still warm and calm. Today's weather is good. You should bask in the sun more, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai. She's out in the sun because she lacks calcium. I don't think there's anything wrong with what he said. Later on, he began to talk more. It's raining. The sound of the rain falling on the lotus leaves, does it sound nice? Wei Wei Bai nodded. Since she had nothing else to do, she could just chat with Jinqian. The other party seemed to be stunned. After a long silence, he said, "You can move." Bai Wei Wei was also stunned. That's right, she could move. Then she looked down and found that she had turned into a beautiful pink lotus flower. Bai Wei Wei. Whoa, what the hell? She was in a vegetative state? The system was also munching on its biscuits. The host turned into a lotus flower for a long time. She didn't notice, and he didn't dare to say. And Wei Wei Bai suddenly found that she had regained her vision. She saw that she was planted in a huge lotus pond. The lotus pond was filled with celestial energy. There was white fog everywhere. There were no flowers, only a bunch of lotus leaves. She stood in the middle, shining brightly. What a beautiful, big lotus flower. Sure enough, she was the prettiest when she turned into a flower. Ah, Jinqian, I'll kill your whole family. You turn me into a lotus flower. Beside the lotus pond, golden specks of light filled the sky and scattered in all directions. The young man's black hair fell to his ankles, and his loose white robe was casually draped over his slender body. Chapter 2460. His dark eyes were as deep as the abyss, filled with endless loneliness and coldness. He sensed the emotional fluctuations in the lotus flower, and a hint of surprise appeared in his cold eyes. He stepped into the pool barefoot, and the water was like flat ground. His ankles fell into the water, but they didn't get wet at all. He came to the side of the lotus flower and squatted down. His black hair fell into the water, floating in the transparent water like black silk. When Jinxian reached out his fair fingertips and touched her petals gently. "Are you conscious now?" His voice was low like a murmur, filled with suppressed anticipation. Wei Wei Bai trembled from his touch. It was purely ticklish. When Jinxian couldn't help but smile. His eyes were clear, as if he was still that young man who had just met Wei Wei Bai and had never experienced pain. "It doesn't matter, even if you forget the past." He slowly touched her petals. Under his lowered eyelashes, his eyes were deep and beautiful. "Anyway, I remember. Wei Wei Bai. I remember everything. I remember everything. You don't need to remember." He still remembered how she tortured him. Wasn't this settling the score after the autumn? Time passed quickly after becoming a lotus flower. She often closed her eyes to sleep. When she woke up, the system told her that she had slept for months. Wei Wei Bai. No, she felt that she had only slept for 5 minutes. Wei Wei Bai didn't know how long had passed. She felt that it had been 10 days to half a month. But the system said that at least 10 years had passed. Wei Wei Bai, this time was worthless, right? It had only been 10 days. How could she sleep for 10 years? She complained to the system. The system flipped through 1,000 movies, TV series, and cartoons, plus a warehouse of books and Sihai. "I finished reading these. Do you want to review them with me? If you have the guts, don't sleep. Come and fight me." The system had already become an old system. If time continued to wait, he would become a fossilized system. And the host was still the same host, because she had directly slept away the matter. So what if he was in a vegetative state? Just when the system and the host thought that time was going to be suspended forever. Suddenly, after being stuck for a long time, the time appeared. Time 1 month. Wei Wei Bai and the system laughed at the same time. What was he doing earlier? How many years had it been? Why did he have to pretend for a month? Forget it. I can go back when I have time. After waiting for another month, he would be able to return home. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai decided to continue being a lotus flower for another month. Wen Jinxian, on the other hand, was still as calm as ever. However, from time to time, he would throw some heavenly treasures into the lotus pond. She spent almost every day by the side of the lotus, lowering her head and whispering some interesting things to him. It was as if he would continue like this forever. But one day, when Wei Wei Bai woke up from her sleep, she found Wen Jinxian leaning against the stem of the lotus. She had grown especially sturdy, like a lotus flower on a tree. It was as if she had eaten hormones to grow up. Therefore, the slender and beautiful young man leaned against the stem of the lotus and stroked the huge lotus petal with his delicate fingers. He didn't feel awkward at all. Instead, he felt that the young man was prettier than the flowers. It was unbelievably beautiful. He didn't speak, but under the crow's eyelashes, those black eyes were silent as if they were dead. It was as if he knew that he had no hope of raising her back. After all, without a soul, even with the immortal Meridian, he could only raise an unfamiliar spirit, not his little fox. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai felt a slight chill on her body. She looked down and saw Wen Jinxian looking down. Under his cold eyes, a line of quiet tears slid down his chin and finally fell into the pond and disappeared. Chapter 2461. A faint line of tears. It touched his heart more than any words. Old Monster Wen suddenly became Wen Shao pitiful. He was not used to it. Wei Wei Bai helplessly reached out her leaf and touched his hair. "Don't cry. I'm not a demon. It's just a breakup. With such a long lifespan, he could just find a cute fox. Who would want his life if he left? Life was the most important thing. Live well and improve every day." In the end, when Leaf reached out, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She was stunned and realized that she had touched Wen Jinxian's hair. It was a white, jade-like hand. It was as tender as a flower bud, and even its fingernails were soft and round. It had no ability to hurt. Wen Jinxian also moved his eyelashes as if he could not believe it. The sparkle that had been suppressed in his dark eyes gushed out. He just stared at her like that. In the huge lotus flower, the petals began to wither. The girl sat in the withered lotus flower. Her silver hair was curly and cute. Her round eyes had a hint of pure and festive light when she was not smiling. She seemed to have just woken up and her eyes were sleepy. Wen Jinxian did not dare to move and allowed the girl's body to lean softly on his shoulder. She was a little confused. Master, Wen Jinxian did not say anything. Was this a dream or the remnants of his obsession? After 9 bolts of mystic lightning, his obsession was completely eliminated. But his obsession was still deep in his bones. He often saw the little fox's shadow running beside him. When he went to the library, he was holding a book. He saw the sloppy little fox holding a pen and doodling on a book. She was not studying seriously at all. He should have hated this kind of lazy person the most. But he felt that she should be like this. She was so cute that he wanted to rub her hair. But when he stretched out his hand, it was just an afterimage. Or occasionally, he would walk to the cafeteria, ignoring the surprised and admiring eyes of the disciples. He would just sit quietly at the place where the little fox ate back then and fantasize that she still existed. He saw the afterimages many times. Instead, he was not so surprised. He even felt that without these afterimages, there would be no lotus flower that represented hope. He would have nothing. In a lotus flower was everything left of her. He couldn't find her soul. He could only hold onto the remains and ashes, hoping that he could raise her. At the bottom of the lotus pond was the soul congregation array that he had built with all his heart. Day and night were just calling for one person to return. He wouldn't force her anymore and wouldn't imprison her. Just to see her one more time, take another look at her. Suddenly, when Jinxian came to a realization, he lowered his eyes and stared at her. He stared at her, from her beautiful and clear eyes to her red lips that were pursed in confusion. He felt that this afterimage was too real. Wei Wei Bai also stared at him, as if competing with him to see whose eyes were bigger. Then, she silently reached out to grab a large lotus petal and wrapped it around herself. Wei Wei Bai thought, "It's a little cold without clothes. I need to wrap myself up. As for shyness or moral integrity, if you don't have those things, don't show them off." Since she was leaving in a month, she could just deal with Wen Jinxian. So she gave him a cute smile. "Master, it's good that you're fine." It was a perfunctory and conventional greeting. Even a surprised expression wasn't professional. Wen Jinxian was silent for a while, as if he had finally confirmed something. His body leaned forward slightly, and his scattered clothes fell to his shoulders. His black hair snaked behind his back and fell into the pond water. The youth reached out and held her arm with his fingers. His fingertips gently pulled her into his arms, as if he was sure of something. His thick eyelashes drooped down, and the loneliness in his eyes turned into a gorgeous, flowing golden emotion. Then he finally lowered his head. He kissed her. Chapter 2462. This kiss came suddenly. Wei Wei Bai instinctively wanted to step back, but he held her wrist tightly, as if he was afraid that she would disappear. Her eyelashes trembled, and there was a trace of astonishment and confusion in her eyes. But she could feel his surging excitement under his calmness. His fingertips were trembling, and the cold and distant darkness in his eyes was also occupied by broken light spots. Under the lotus leaves in the pool, countless buds suddenly appeared. The fragrance was strong, just like the aura of the man in front of her. It was tempting and had a desire to destroy, and a tenderness that would never change until death. Wei Wei Bai wanted to struggle, but when she reached out and touched his chest, she found that his skin was trembling. Excitement, fear, and disbelief pulled this young man from a cold and holy god into the realm of mortals. He was still happy. Wei Wei Bai hesitated and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Her lips parted slightly, and she accepted his enthusiasm. The spirit stone door of the Heaven Sect's main hall. It finally opened slowly. He stood by the waterfall with his sword in his arms. He looked at Su San coldly. Su San had just accepted the mystic thunder of the Middle Deshang stage and successfully advanced to the Middle Deshang stage. He was the disciple with the highest cultivation in the entire Heaven Sect. No, he couldn't be considered a disciple of the Heaven Sect. He was expelled from the sect. He could still remember the scene when he was expelled from the sect. In fact, at that time, his master wanted to kill him. But Su San cried out in grief, "She likes you. She has always liked you." This sentence saved his life. His master was also in a daze. He directly closed the spirit stone door and concentrated on cultivating the lotus. Everyone knew that their little sister couldn't be raised back, but they didn't dare to expose it. After all, a person who could be sore took out his own immortal vein just to keep this glimmer of hope. If the hope was shattered, that was almost unimaginable. Susan sat in the waterfall, and the water of the waterfall had the evil spirit of cultivating ice blades. Even a Deshang stage cultivator could feel severe pain sitting here for a long time. Susan had been sitting here for 10 years. It doesn't seem like it's here to cultivate, but more like a punishment for me. Just like that, the two Marshall brothers stood by the waterfall and watched. One sat in the waterfall and took a shower. This strange scene happened every day. It was about to become one of the best scenic spots in the Heavenly Gates sect. Suddenly, Susan opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the main hall in disbelief. Mystic One hesitated for a moment before looking over as well. He found the door open. The door that had not been opened for so many years was now open. The two of them looked at each other, then turned into streaks of light and disappeared. By the time they arrived at the entrance, the rest of the disciples had also arrived. After all, it was rare for Shurzuin to leave the sect. Of course, they all wanted to see if their master was missing anything. It was not wrong to say that the entire Heavenly Gate sect was Wen Jinxian's fan club. When Wen Jinxian entered the demonic state previously, he killed all the Mahayana cultivators. It shocked the entire immortal cultivation world and caused many immortal cultivators to panic. They began to besiege the Heaven sect. Then they were all beaten back. The people of the Heavenly Gates sect looked calm. His master had turned into a demon. What's wrong? I'm just going to beat you up. Their master was still their master. In the past 10 years, they had hardly seen one Jinxian. 10 years ago, when they wanted to raise the lotus, they needed a lot of heaven and earth treasures. They could often see when Jinxian go out and stroll around a library or the cafeteria. However, when they started to raise the lotus, he was gone. The huge spirit stone door opened halfway. Suddenly, behind the door, a pink hand gently rested on the side of the stone door. On the crystal clear stone door, the hand was slender and powerless, but it was exceptionally beautiful and exquisite. It was even a bit more crystal clear than the jade door. Everyone stared at the hand, almost unable to believe it. Wasn't this a girl's hand? Chapter 2463. It had been a long time since they had seen a woman in the Heavenly Gates sect. Ever since little junior sister was gone. Since then, no woman had been able to pass the entrance exam and enter the Heavenly Gates sect, although little junior sister did not enter through an experiment. However, her uniqueness was one of a kind. Then, under everyone's strange and puzzled gazes, Wei Wei Bai tilted her head curiously and appeared from behind the door. The sun outside the door was even brighter. She couldn't help but squint her round eyes. The sparkling orange light rippled in her eyes. She was exceptionally beautiful. Her silver curly hair had a faint pink color. It was like the color of the petals of a lotus flower. There was no fox aura on her. There was no human feeling. Instead, it was an exceptionally pleasant plant fragrance and the fragrance of lotus flowers. In the middle of her forehead, the lotus flower had already become a complete lotus flower. Master had placed his immortal meridian into her body. He had also sent his spiritual energy, C, in her forehead. The little fox, no, the little lotus flower. Her current ability was much higher than Susan's. When she saw them, she couldn't help but reveal a cute smile. Hello, senior brothers. This simple and annoying greeting. It blew away all the past grudges. The little fox's betrayal. It was to fulfill Wen Jinxian's immortal Tao. Later, to block the lightning tribulation from Master, she even died. This made the group of senior brothers feel sad and guilty when they saw her. Therefore, everyone was silent and didn't know what to say for a moment. Suddenly, a hand gently landed on Wei Wei Bai's shoulder. The youth behind her appeared. His cold attitude turned into gentleness like a spring breeze. You don't have to call me senior brother in the future. You're already married to me. It should be them calling you master's wife. Wen Jinqian's thin lips curled up slightly, and his eyes were filled with a gentle smile. Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled even more brightly. She waved her hand and called, Xian. Xian, Wei Wei Bai saw Su San again. She called out generously, Su San. The corners of Su San's mouth twitched. He had nothing to say. Chen Si, Ninwu, a row of people called over. Everyone had a cold expression. Wen Jinqian held her hand and said calmly, Call me Ma Am. Everyone immediately lowered their heads and respectfully called out, Mistress. Su Sanqi paused for a moment. Then, as if he had thought of something, he could only sigh and softly call out, Master's wife. Wen Jinqian lowered his eyes to look at her. His slender fingers were intertwined with hers, one by one. Then he said, From now on, you're in charge here. Wei Wei Bai tilted her head and stared at him for a long time. A trace of hesitation flashed through her eyes, but in the end, she didn't say anything and just smiled. Wen Jinqian pulled her and walked out of the door calmly. The Heavenly Gates sect was still surrounded by immortal energy and spiritual energy. Cranes chirped as hundreds of flowers bloomed. Their back view as they walked together was so warm that it moved people. Everyone was silent for a long time. Xian Yi finally said, I haven't seen Master smile for a long time. It was such a pure smile, and his eyes were full of warmth. Even before he'd met the little fox, he'd never seen him smile like this. Everything in the world seemed to have nothing to do with Master. Even his smile was disdainful and isolated from the mortal world. Then, everything changed. Su San hugged his sword and lowered his head. He snorted coldly. I will become stronger in the future. If he doesn't treat her well, he swallowed his words. He still had a grudge against Wen Jinqian. / next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it, if you like. Chapter 2464. Especially when he heard that the little fox died to block the lightning tribulation. This was also why he worked so hard to improve, just to catch up with Wen Jinqian, because at least he could get justice for the little fox. But there was no need for that now. Su San walked away expressionlessly. They were very good. He felt that he was going to fall into a situation of eating dog food again. Did it hurt? Don't ask. If you ask again, you will die alone. Wei Wei Bai found that although there were no ears on her head, lotus leaves would occasionally grow on her body. She had really turned into a lotus root. The system also said it smells good. Wei Wei Bai held her face. Isn't it fragrant and beautiful? It feels like a peerless beauty when you smell it. System. No, it smells very good with pork ribs. The lotus root stewed pork rib soup is especially delicious. There's also pork stir-fried lotus root, cold lotus root slices with green onions, fresh lotus root shrimp porridge. Wei Wei Bai. Is it an illusion? Why did I hear the system swallow? From animal to plant. Wei Wei Bai felt that she had been a drama queen for most of her life. But this was the first time she was a plant spirit. Smelling herself, she felt that it was delicious. So this was the reason why when Jinqian pressed on her from time to time, half forcefully lifted her chin and kissed her as if he was hungry, especially in a place like the library. Did he have a control of the venue? Wei Wei Bai stared at the young man's black eyes. His eyes were moist, the young man who fell from the top of the cold peak into the mortal world, although he was still wearing a white robe. But there was a passion that she had never seen before. He seemed to have really become a young boy who fell in love for the first time. Even when he was choosing a dress for her, he had to ask carefully, did she like it? She felt that when Jinqian was cute, even licking her dog. It was only a month's stay. Wei Wei Bai was leisurely. She did not cause any trouble at all. For example, she would torment him with an amnesia joke, or she would make a heartless joke about going on a trip. In any case, she would do whatever when Jinqian did. There was no need to mention how comfortable their days were. One Jinqian, who was not possessed, still had a sense of abstinence. Her fair fingers picked up the brush and wrote in one go. He gently raised his head to look at her. His beautiful black eyes were clear and bright. Is this how to draw the advanced teleportation talisman? Wei Wei Bai leaned over the table and stared at the talisman for a while. Then, she pouted and sighed. I don't. When Jin Xian saw her lying lazily on the bed, her silver curly hair casually draped over her thin back. Her watery eyes were smiling. How many years had it been? She had always been an illusion of his obsession. He stared at her in a daze for a while before softly saying with a smile, "It's fine if you don't know anything. I'll make more. If you want to use it, just take it." During this period of time, he had been teaching her some high-level arrays. But Wei Wei Bai was here to eat and wait for death. How could he study seriously? Therefore, she smiled and said, "Husband, if you know how to do it, why would I need to know this?" There was a hint of joy in Wen Jinxian's gentle eyes, but there was a hint of depression in his eyes. "All right, I'll prepare it for you." It was the Lantern Festival again. Wen Jinxian held Wei Wei Bai's hand and went to look at the lights. The bustling world was filled with smoke and fire. The colors of the lights fell on Wen Jinxian's exquisite face and the light in his eyes. It was like all the beautiful colors in the world. It was all on this young man. His smile was gentle, and the elegance of age was in his every move. Bai Weiwei still had 2 buns on her head, the red ribbon fluttering in the wind. She was holding a beautiful red bean cake. The red bean cake was covered with green leaves, and it was fresh and sweet. For the convenience of your next reading, you can click on the button below to record this reading record. Chapter 2465. Today was the last day she would stay here. The system said that her body would automatically degenerate and turn back into a lotus. Her soul would also return to reality. Wei Wei Bai didn't feel much after hearing this. After all, they had gone back and forth to so many planes. She was used to it, so she still happily followed Wen Jinxian out to play. Wen Jinxian carried the rabbit lantern. The young man's face was too handsome. Even when he was carrying such a childish thing, he still looked like a painting. He gazed at her with a gentle expression. The girl lowered her head and ate the red bean cake. The 2 of them returned to normal and walked forward, but the atmosphere was a little more ambiguous. When they walked to the river, they saw countless wishing lamps floating away. Wei Wei Bai didn't have any thoughts and was about to pass by, but she heard Wen Jinxian's low and gentle voice. "Let me make a wish." Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. He had already stretched out his fingertips. A piece of paper appeared on the rabbit lantern, and the paper was hidden in the lantern. The young man quietly lowered his eyes. His eyelashes were half closed, and the shadows under his eyes brought out a gloomy darkness. He bent over, and his exquisite wrist bones were exposed from his sleeves. The beautiful rabbit lantern was gently touched by his fingertips. It floated far away. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be a little curious. She tiptoed to see where her lantern had floated to. However, she saw Wen Jinxian standing by the water. His gaze was affectionate, and his features were gentle and exquisite. He stretched out his wrist, and a thread of love appeared on his wrist bone. The red thread was exceptionally beautiful. It was stained with the aura of the soul, and it looked even more lustrous. The deeper the emotion, the brighter the red thread. Wei Wei, I hated this thing at first. No, to be exact, at first, he was disdainful and cold. When they first met, the first time he saw her, it was a faint fluctuation. At that time, he even had murderous intentions. Later, she died in the lightning tribulation. He hated this thing because he guessed that it was this thing. It caused the soul aura to exchange. The lightning tribulation mistook her for someone else and took her away. But when she reappeared from the lotus, he would be grateful if this thing didn't exist. Connect their souls. Not to mention 100 years. Even 10,000 years would not be enough to summon her soul back. Yes, it had been 100 years. He wanted to raise her from the very beginning. From the moment the seed fell into the pond until she began to turn into a lotus flower. Later on, it finally withered and woke up from the petals. A total of 100 years. She didn't know. Maybe she just felt like she had slept. No one told her how long 100 years of wind and rain was. In the past, he might have thought that it wasn't long. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Com download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read on your phone. https://m. Sashu. Comto facilitate your next reading. You can click on the Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 2466. After all, in the cultivation world, time was worthless. Occasionally, a major seclusion could last hundreds of years. But to him, this 100 years was more difficult than the previous 700 years. It was even too long. It was so long that he thought he was extremely old. Sometimes, he would be terrified and grab his hair to look. Had it turned white? Little Fox would definitely like a young man, not an old man. He saw the little fox looking at him with a puzzled expression. Her round, watery eyes were still pure. When Jin Xian didn't explain too clearly and just smiled. But now, I like this line very much. Wei Wei Bai looked at the time. It was already past 11 o'clock. She was going to leave. She didn't want to turn into a lotus in front of Wen Jinxian. She said with a smile, Wen Jinxian, I'm going to buy a lamp and make a wish like you. Wen Jinxian stared at her silently for a while before revealing a smile. The young man's thin lips were exquisite and slightly cold. His eyes were dark and pure. When his smile spread, it was filled with the broken shadows of the joyful lights. He said, Okay, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai immediately jumped up and down, her long ribbon swaying behind her. She ran to the most prosperous place in the world. Her footsteps were filled with joy. When Jin Xian still stood in place, his body began to shatter. He was already dead. He snatched a soul destined to disappear from the heavenly Tao. He asked what price he had to pay. With immortal meridians, soul, and eternal fortune. Amazing talent, intelligent spiritual aura, strong physical body, abundant spiritual aura in the sea of consciousness. Everything about him. He threw himself into the lotus one by one. Let her grow. Heavenly materials and earthly treasures were just a foundation. He had used everything he had to exchange for everything she had. 100 years ago, he had used up everything he had. In exchange, the lotus began to grow. In fact, 100 years ago, he had nothing and should have died. He only relied on the red line on his wrist, which was closely related to her soul aura. He deceived the heavenly Tao and let his lifespan drag on for 100 years. And when he finally changed her back, it was time for him to disappear. The youth stared at her back as she left. His beautiful fingertips began to disperse into light spots. The note in the lamp behind him. It was just a simple wish. I only hope that you can live happily for a very, very long time. I don't ask that you remember me, and you don't need to love me anymore. I just need to love you. The young man's vision began to disappear. His black eyelashes became transparent, and his eyes were filled with countless specks of light. The lights were brilliant, and he had become the light within them. He remembered that there were countless storage bags in the main hall of the Heaven Sect. There was also the secret manual for opening the secret realm. He gave her everything he had. She didn't know how to draw charms, so he drew many charms for her to use. She didn't know how to use arrays, but he made many arrays for her to use. There were even absolute orders given to the disciples of the Heavenly Gates sect. The entire Heavenly Gates sect did everything they could to protect her. Of course, he had already kicked Su San away. This was his last bit of jealousy. When Jin Xian thought, what else is there to do? Perhaps no one else would be as protective of the little fox as he was in the future. What a pity. He sighed faintly, then revealed a smile. The slender and beautiful youth had completely disappeared. As for Bai Weiwei, who bought a lamp, her heart moved and she frowned. The system said, let's go, it's time. Weiwei Bai couldn't help but look back. She didn't know where Wen Jinxian had gone. However, without seeing her turn into a lotus, the impact might not be so great. She closed her eyes, and her soul disappeared on the spot. Only a small lotus fell to the ground. The lotus was boiling with a mortal aura, protected by the array, and mortals couldn't see it. And Su San, who had been following the two, but didn't dare to get too close because of Wen Jinxian. When he noticed that Wen Jinxian had disappeared, he rushed over. He saw the scene of the little fox turning into a lotus. When he held little Lotus in his hands, tears started to fall, because everything of his master was in the lotus. He had cultivated to this stage. What else did he not understand? These two people, in the end, only left this lotus. The lights were still there, but Hua Jiao and Yi Sheng were not there. //T. Chapter 2467. The system trembled as it hugged the warm gloves it had woven. Its small body struggled to follow the big boss in front of it. In the darkness, a galaxy-like path appeared. Yi Yuxuan's slender back looked exceptionally tall and powerful in the silver light. It was just that the temperature around him was a little cold. The system felt that Boss Yi had been tortured by the host this time. So when he died and turned into a soul, he became angry. After all, the torture this time was too long and too miserable. The host slept like a pig and didn't care at all. It didn't see how this boss was tortured. After the lightning tribulation, that 100 years was simply a sad memory of torturing the big boss. To let the host's soul come back. Not to mention that the time status was stuck in the pending state. Wen Jinxian was willing to work hard without complaint. He put in everything he had to nurture the lotus. It was not easy for the model worker to raise his little cutie. He was going to die. So be it. In the end, when he died, he realized that he had turned from a model worker to a model worker. 100 years of hard work was kicked away by Wei Wei Bai. He left just like that. The system didn't dare to say that he watched when Jinxian disappear. Yi Yuxuan's soul appeared in place. In the bustling lights, his soul power was incomparable and radiated in all directions. Then, under the gaze of this powerful power, Wei Wei Bai left his body casually, letting everything that was condensed from 100 years of hard work. He retreated back into a lotus. At that time, he saw Yi Yuxuan's expression, that gloomy and cold. In the past, at least the time was short. No matter how much effort was spent, it would at most be 100 years. Of course, there were special planes that took a longer time. But for a cultivation plane to grow to such an extent, it took so much effort. In the end, before he died, he was still gratified that he had raised a flower. He could live happily for a while. In the end, as soon as he left, his soul awakened and he saw Bai Wuqing leave. Even if Wei Wei Bai lived for 3 more days, Yi Yuxuan would come back slowly. It wouldn't have made Boss Ye's face turn black now. Everyone had a buffer period. This time, Yi Yuxuan's soul chased after him and slept in Wen Jinxian's body. That was why Wen Jinxian did everything. Yi Yuxuan had a very deep understanding of this. It was almost as if she had done it herself. The depth of this kind of immersion was something that Wei Wei Bai, who was heartless and had an emotional shield, could not imagine. It was no wonder that Yi Yuxuan couldn't recover in time. His face darkened the entire time. After all, his current mood swings were much more intense than before. The system suddenly stepped on his pants and almost fell over. When he finally steadied himself, he looked up. What about Yi Yuxuan? Where was his host? The space storm blew past, brushing past the system's face. The system was silent for a long time before it finally exploded. Yi Yuxuan took his host away again. Where did she go? Was he up to no good? Was it going to eat her soul? Now that the host's soul is the lotus root, the pork rib soup is delicious. That was not the main point. The main point was, where was his host? Wei Wei Bai woke up. A lonely gust of wind blew past. A few bones rolled past her feet. This was a gloomy place. This was a place where bones were piled up. She slowly looked up and saw a rusty iron sword. The beautiful and ancient patterns were covered in a thick layer of rust, and within the rust were traces of dried black blood. Beside the iron sword was a familiar throne. The bones were pieced together. It was pale, but did not feel ghostly at all. Chapter 2468. Instead, it was a cold and powerful aura that came head-on. This aura made Wei Wei Bai feel goosebumps rise on her skin. What made her eyes twitch even more was the man sitting on the skeleton throne. His long black hair, with a dark luster, quietly fell on his shoulders. The beautiful man's eyelashes were slightly lowered, and the golden light under his thick eyelashes was frozen. There was only a kind of heartless coldness on his cold and exquisite face. He was like a golden-eyed king frozen in ice and snow. He looked at the living beings under his feet emotionlessly. He could destroy the world with a raise of his hand at any time. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She felt that this man's face was a little familiar. Yi Yuxuan. But it was very similar, but there were also differences. After all, she was so familiar with Yi Yuxuan. This man sitting here. She could still tell whether it was him or not. It was just a person who looked a little like Yi Yuxuan, or a ghost. She sat on a bone mountain and felt uncomfortable. She tried to move a little, but she found that the golden light in the man's eyes flowed. It seemed that he was about to wake up. She instinctively felt that this guy was not to be trifled with. She seemed to have seen him last time. After that, she never saw him again. She thought that she was having a nightmare, so she threw it to the back of her mind. But now she saw him again, and every time she woke up, she did not have a system. She should have returned to reality. Could it be that she fell here because of some accident? Was this the gray area between reality and the plane? Wei Wei Bai had experienced the cultivation plane, and many possibilities flashed through her mind. Or maybe the system accidentally used the small world built by that big boss as its own path. That was why it accidentally let her come here? Wei Wei Bai slowly stood up. The eyelashes of the man on the throne moved, but he did not move. She found that he seemed to be resting, so his body could not move. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back. She found that he did not react. Then she boldly turned around and ran forward. He had to find a system first. Being trapped here made him feel uneasy. With great difficulty, she finally stepped over a few skulls and was about to descend the mountain. However, he found that the skeletons suddenly stood up shakily. He stood up. Those bones seemed to be pulled by some kind of power and pieced together into countless skeletons. They were all here for Wei Wei Bai. A huge beast-like skeleton looked up to the sky and roared. Then it stomped on the skeleton mountain. Step by step, he crushed the bones and rushed toward Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai. Fuck, Husky, you scare me to death. She broke into a run, and the skeletons followed her. Wei Wei Bai, who was most afraid of ghosts, felt that this was the scariest scene she had ever encountered. She covered her head and scurried to the side of the throne, only to find that she had run back. Damn it, there was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. Just as she was about to make a turn, she realized that the running skeletons had stopped. They seemed to be afraid as they took a few steps back. Then, they lay on the ground, trembling. In hindsight, Bai Weiwei looked at the throne. However, she found that the man had already opened his eyes. His golden eyes were as beautiful as flowing gold. He stared quietly at Wei Wei Bai. His eyes were cold and calm, deep and gorgeous. There was also a hint of suppressed anger. Wei Wei Bai laughed dryly, and then took a few steps back. Then, she found that as she stepped back, all the skeletons were looking at her. /T. Chapter 2469. Every time she took a step back, the skulls would take a step forward. Wei Wei Bai could only move to the man's side. She thought that the man was also a ghost, and a big ghost that was a leader. Maybe the next second, he would peel off his face and reveal his skull. But she found that the man stared at her indifferently for a while, and then slowly lowered his eyes and ignored her. Wei Wei Bai always had a feeling that this guy was angry, and he was angry with her, so he wanted to give her a cold war. She didn't know him. She didn't want to be like an ex-boyfriend who came to find trouble with her after breaking up. When the man lowered his eyes again, the skulls seemed to have received some kind of encouragement. The eerie white bone claws crawled forward bit by bit. They looked at Wei Wei Bai with greedy and terrifying eyes, as if the skulls didn't have eyes. But Wei Wei Bai saw it. They wanted to eat her. System, where did you go? Your host is going to be eaten. She couldn't call the system back, so she could only retreat step by step, until she suddenly bumped into something with her heel. It was a little cold, a little hard. Just as she was about to turn around, she saw the biggest bestial skull howl. It scared Wei Wei Bai so much that she fell back and sat directly into a cold embrace that made people shiver. She froze and found that the place she bumped into was a man's foot. and the place she was sitting now was a man's thigh. The man's embrace was like a cold and hard embrace. There was no trace of life. There was also no warmth like blood flowing. There was also no heartbeat, pulse, or the breath of human life. In any case, it was similar to a stone. Was it really a ghost? Wei Wei Bai immediately stiffened and didn't dare to move. And those skulls also didn't dare to move. They just lay there and stared at Wei Wei Bai, but none of them dared to come up to eat her. Wei Wei Bai's intuition told her these things were very dangerous, and they really wanted to eat her. Even if it was a skull, she could see their strange and greedy expressions. This nightmare was truly long and terrifying. Wei Wei Bai sat there awkwardly while the man behind her lowered his eyes indifferently. He seemed to be asleep. After sitting for a long time, she was bored and couldn't help but turn around to look. She saw him looking down as if he was deep in thought. A faint glimmer of light flashed through those beautiful, golden eyes, but it was hard to tell what kind of emotions they were feeling. His unbelievably beautiful face was much more exquisite than Yi Yuxuan's. She thought that Yi Yuxuan was good-looking enough. He hadn't expected to find an upgraded version of Yi Yuxuan. However, it was precisely because it was too beautiful and exquisite that it felt unreal. It was so unreal that it didn't seem human at all. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but think about Yi Yuxuan at the beginning. In fact, it also looked like a robot. But compared to this man, Yi Yuxuan was a robot. But sometimes it was quite cute. Even if he was a robot, he was still a human. He still had the warmth of a human and certain characteristics of a human. But this man didn't have a single trace of dust in him. She didn't like it, because she was thinking about things. She stared at him for too long. The man's eyelashes moved, and a trace of intense fluctuation appeared in his golden eyes. It was as if something was struggling, and then a trace of softness appeared in his calm golden eyes. A flash of gentleness, a soul aura that made an exquisite puppet come to life. Wei Wei Bai looked at him in surprise. A hand suddenly pressed down on the back of her neck and pressed her against his chest. Chapter 2470. His chest was hard and firm, and there was no heartbeat. It made Wei Wei Bai panic. The man's other hand crossed her waist, and his strong arm trapped her in his arms. His delicate thin red lips pressed against her fair and small ear, and his breath was cold. "You make me angry." The man's voice was low and cold, with a trace of elegant magnetism. "I'll be angry here for 3 minutes before I let you go." He was afraid that when he returned to reality, he would not be able to recover and would be cold to her. He could not bear to be angry with her. He could only bring her here and let her accept her punishment. He could only wake up for a few minutes in this cold and noble body. This was the data he obtained after many tests. After a few minutes, his consciousness would disappear. Before his consciousness disappeared in this body, he would bring her back to reality. "Wei Wei Bai, boss, who are you?" "I don't know you." The man pressed her down and hugged her quietly. There were skulls all around. The seat was a skeleton. The wind was cold. Wei Wei Bai was dumbfounded. Just when she thought that she would never wake up from this nightmare, the man suddenly grabbed her waist and carried her up. Then by the time Bai Wei Wei reacted, he had already placed her on the wide, white-boned seat. Wei Wei Bai leaned against the back seat, and there was still a thigh bone. Damn it. She wanted to go home. Then, she watched as the man effortlessly pulled out the iron sword beside the throne. The rust was still there, and the smell of blood did not change. The tip of the sword swept gently in front of him, and the awakened skulls were shattered into powder and scattered in all directions. This quiet place regained its calm and dead aura. He casually inserted the iron sword into the place where it was just now, and then turned around. His cold and exquisite face was so calm that it was as if what happened just now was just a breath. The anger in his eyes also disappeared. Wei Wei Bai looked at him, lowering his head, and his black hair fell on her body. There was a trace of human vitality in his golden eyes. "Okay, go to sleep." After saying that, he reached out and pressed her eyes. She leaned against the chair and fell asleep. Yi Yuxuan stood up again. He closed his eyes and separated himself from this powerful and exquisite body. A beautiful and powerful soul reappeared beside Wei Wei Bai. The golden-eyed king stood silently beside the sword. Yi Yuxuan glanced at him expressionlessly before reaching out to hug Wei Wei Bai. She turned back into a white soul ball and quietly nestled in his arms. Yi Yuxuan turned around and was about to leave when she suddenly realized something and quickly disappeared, and at the place where he had just been standing. The iron sword was stuck there. If he hesitated for even a second, his soul would be destroyed. When Yi Yuxuan reappeared, she was already in midair. His body, which had been standing just a moment ago, had quietly returned to his throne. He raised his head, but there was a trace of confusion in his cold and emotionless eyes. Yi Yuxuan also narrowed her eyes. Was this the powerful consciousness that could suppress him? When he first entered this body, he was suppressed by a terrifyingly powerful consciousness. This consciousness was filled with endless killing, a crazy and twisted bloody aura, an ancient and distant majesty, and a cold and inhumane cruelty. If he didn't have the love left behind by Wei Wei Bai in his heart, he might have been swallowed up. Yi Yuxuan calmly analyzed that the consciousness in this body was related to him. In fact, it was once one with him. Chapter 2471. This kind of analysis required more explorations before it could be verified. Yi Yuxuan hugged Wei Tuanzi and slowly retreated. The man sitting on the throne looked at him coldly. He didn't seem to be fully awake. His golden eyes were cold and empty, but it was enough to make people feel fear. Yi Yuxuan wasn't afraid. He protected Wei Tuanzi and calmly analyzed. He knew that he couldn't beat this guy, and Yi Yuxuan looked at the man's wrist. There was a red line. That red line was connected to Wei Wei Bai's wrist. The red lines of the three of them were intertwined. Dead knots were tied one after another. Unless it was forcefully broken, it would be impossible to undo them. Yi Yuxuan retreated step by step. His calm heart was filled with all kinds of data analysis. The system, who rushed over, forcibly raised its height and activated its greatest strength. Zhang Yang's red hair was like a lion's head. The young man's slender body was strong and agile like a leopard. He bared his teeth and rolled up his sleeves, ready to fight with Yi Yuxuan. The chosen one was amazing. It was good enough that he hugged the host. The host's soul disappeared just like that. Where was the system's dignity? Even if he couldn't beat Yi Yuxuan, for the sake of dignity? Wait a minute. How did Yi Yuxuan's human nature and divinity conflict? The system braked quickly and saw a scene that made its liver and guts burst. The terrifying guy on the throne was looking up at Yi Yuxuan in midair. This was the place where Yi Yuxuan's power was. The man on the throne was the condensation of Yi Yuxuan's divinity. Divinity was heartless, emotionless, sad, and happy. It only had the intention to kill. Yi Yuxuan, on the other hand, was a human nature that was forcefully pried out by the host. The power of human nature was definitely weaker than divinity. No matter what kind of power it was the same person. But it was just like schizophrenia, even if it was the same person. There were also times when the strong and the weak would fight each other. Yi Yuxuan loved Wei Wei Bai. This was only natural. After all, she had been abused by the host in so many planes, so she had developed a deep love for him. Humans were just that pretentious. The more they were tortured, the more they loved them. What could he do? But Yi Yuxuan's divine power had no feelings. When the time came, Yi Yuxuan would return to his real body. Divine power would definitely devour human nature. This was also why he knew that in the future, Yi Yuxuan would definitely forget about the host. Because the divine Yi Yuxuan would not love its host. But what was going on? There was no need to talk about the intersecting red lines. Yi Yuxuan had the power of divinity. She was the queen of golden eyes. Why do you look so unhappy? Are those ripples of emotion in your eyes? How could the power of divinity have emotions? Thinking back to the past, the power of divinity had repeatedly tried to pull Wei Wei Bai's soul over. The system thought that it was because of Yi Yuxuan's human nature. But Yi Yuxuan automatically separated herself. Why did the power of divinity still have emotions? And it looked like it wanted to fight with Yi Yuxuan. You guys are one body. So what's the point of fighting? Aren't you just hitting yourself? Suddenly, it realized something. Yi Yuxuan and the man on the throne looked at the system at the same time. That gloomy gaze of death seemed to feel that the system had disturbed them. The system, who had rolled up its sleeves and was about to fight, was silent for a moment. It suddenly tiptoed back and disappeared with a whoosh. Host, take care. He was about to risk his life fighting with Yi Yuxuan's human nature. In the end, Yi Yuxuan's divine power had also awakened. He really couldn't beat it. He wouldn't get involved in this complicated heterosexual relationship. You're the boss. You could do whatever you want. Yi Yuxuan also took this opportunity and disappeared with Wei Wei Bai, returning directly to reality. The land of bones was still cold and desolate. The man sitting on the throne slowly lowered his eyes. A strange fluctuation appeared in his calm golden eyes. He slowly opened his fingers. In the center of his palm, a doll appeared. It was a cute version of Wei Wei Bai, smiling brightly. The man looked at it for a long time, then closed his palm again. Then, he continued to look down in silence. It was as if all the emotional fluctuations were just an illusion. And the red line on his wrist was incomparably bright. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://www.sashu.com download the full article. https://m sashu.com//. Chapter 2472. Bai Weiwei flipped over like a sparrow hawk and got up from the bed. Her sleepy eyes were misty, a few strands of hair were standing up, and there were red marks on her fair face from sleeping. She looked unusually cute and confused. What happened? Where was the skull? Where was the man who looked like Yi Yuxuan but was more handsome? Or was it a male ghost? She looked around and found that she was on her own bed in reality. The familiar decoration style, the clean and sweet room, and the fresh-cut flowers at the bedside. Wei Wei Bai touched her head and thought for a long time with a calm face. She felt that the dream was very strange. Could it be that she had been coveting Yi Yuxuan for so long that even her nightmares were about Yi Yuxuan? Right, where was Yi Yuxuan? The system said secretly, he's being interrogated in the living room. Wei Wei Bai, what? Who dares to interrogate Yi Yuxuan? Who would have the guts? She didn't even dare to interrogate him. Unless he cheated. Yes. Wei Wei Bai narrowed her beautiful eyes. This kind of mentality was not good, although they were both hot. But there was the strategy system in between, and there was also the problem of lifespan and other hardcore issues. So they were not hot enough. So even if Yi Yuxuan was with someone else, it could not be said that he cheated. At most, it would be a change of heart. Her awkward identity was not suitable to interrogate him. She had even kicked away the title of fiancé and fiancé. She could not just eat back the identity that Yi Yuxuan liked someone else. That would damage her noble character. So why was she thinking about this kind of problem? Shouldn't she be curious about who was interrogating Yi Yuxuan? The system saw her curiosity and said secretly, your doctor, your father, and a nurse. Wei Wei Bai's brain was filled with a violent drama in a flash. Could it be that the nurse's pregnancy was actually Qin Xiu's? But Qin Xiu was unwilling to admit it and framed Yi Yuxuan. Before he could finish his melodramatic thoughts, the system said, Yi Yuxuan took the sleeping pills for the second time. Qin Xiu is jumping up and down. He even asked the nurse to bring in the medical equipment and insisted on checking his body condition. This time, after Yi Yuxuan woke up, she refused to go to the hospital. So Qin Xiu was at his wit's end. As for Bai Changyan, he was just a bystander. After all, 3 days had passed, and his daughter had woken up. Furthermore, the Yi family's food was quite delicious. If there was a chance, the food that son-in-law Yi personally cooked would be delicious. Wei Wei Bai hurriedly jumped off the bed, hurriedly changed into her pajamas, and put on a dress. Did Yi Yuxuan take things too hard? Did I leave her hanging too much? Is that why he felt hopeless in love and wanted to die? System, the host's skin had always been so beautiful and thick. He shouldn't be surprised. Was he Dada the kind of person who would die for love? The system thought of the emotional fragments of those perverted, affectionate people in the plane. Okay, yes. Wei Wei Bai opened the door and saw on the opposite side, on the long, pine-cone sofa. Yi Yuxuan's face was a little pale, sitting quietly on the sofa. The young man's beautiful side face, under the sunlight from the window, appeared hazy and white, with a delicate feeling of unreality. He was holding a coffee cup in his hand. The bone porcelain cup was painted with ink, which set off his fair and delicate fingertips, almost glowing. Qin Xiu's back was facing Wei Wei Bai, and he reached out to knock on the table and shouted, "What are you thinking about? Say it, it's the second time. You slept for 3 days and took dozens of sleeping pills. Are you planning to soar to become an immortal?" The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 2473. The system that didn't dare to speak. Yes, his soul did just become an immortal and soar. Yi Yuxuan didn't say anything, calmly drinking his coffee. He didn't care at all what Qin Xiu was shouting. He couldn't drink too much coffee right now. It was too bad for his stomach. Under his somewhat messy black hair, his eyes were cold, with a trace of imperceptible tiredness. The coffee forcibly refreshed him. What did Qin Xiu want to shout again? Yi Yuxuan faintly raised his eyes, a few more glimmers of light in his dark and cold eyes. But it seemed even more desolate. Wei Wei hasn't woken up yet. Your voice is too high. Although there is sound insulation here, a noisy environment will obviously affect my girl. My girl? How could Yi Yuxuan say such a mushy name in such a calm and natural tone? Wei Wei Bai felt that she was already a weird old aunt. She was moved, so I'm still a little girl. She looked so delicate, cute, and beautiful that she could be regarded as a girl. Women always like to be young girls. No, to be younger, girls are better. System, vomit, this kind of poisonous and disgusting dog food. He didn't want to eat it. Damn, Yi Yuxuan must have been affected by the previous plane. Because in Wen Jinxian's heart in the previous plane, Wei Wei Bai was a little girl. But the reality also called her that. It was really too hard to explain. Qin Xiu was also stuck, after all, this kind of shameless and mushy name, my girl. From Yi Yuxuan's calm and indifferent mouth. The contrast was really too big. Those who didn't know would think that Yi Yuxuan was talking about his daughter. A stench of dog food hit him coldly. Qin Xiu hurriedly waved his hand desperately in his mind to get rid of the dog food. Then he said coldly, "If you have something to say, you can tell me. If you don't tell me, how am I supposed to know why you wanted to commit suicide?" Yi Yuxuan sipped her coffee calmly. Her lips were a little pale. She pursed the edge of the porcelain cup, showing a trace of fragility. After finishing his coffee, he said calmly, "I'm in good shape." Qin Xiu sneered. "How good can it be? All of your body's functional data are lower than normal. If you don't feel nauseous and dizzy after waking up, you could be considered to be able to bear it. No, a normal person would have already ascended to heaven." Yi Yuxuan put the bone porcelain cup on the table without any emotion. He calmly reached out and pinched the space between his eyebrows. His head did hurt a little. It wasn't the sleeping pill's fault. It was the after-effects of facing that strange golden-eyed man. He suddenly stopped what he was doing. He raised his eyelashes slightly and looked through the gaps between his fingers. She saw Wei Wei Bai standing at the door. It was obvious that she had just woken up. She had changed into a dress, but she had forgotten to button the top button, revealing her white neck and faintly discernible collarbone. The light red checker dress was fresh and elegant. She looked at him thoughtfully, her eyes containing a trace of strange scrutiny. Her body was still thin, but her momentum was getting stronger and stronger. Originally, she appeared slender because of her illness, but now there was a sense of coldness and refinement. It seemed that those dreams didn't just affect him. In fact, she was also infected. Yi Yuxuan calmly put down his fingers, pursed his thin lips, and said in a low voice, "Wei Wei, wake up." Wei Wei Bai looked at Qin Xiu with an anxious face. Then she looked at Bai Changyin with a confused face. Finally, she looked at Yi Yuxuan with a calm face. Then she calmly touched her stomach. I'm hungry. Yi Yuxuan nodded indifferently, then got up. Her fingers casually rolled up the cuffs of her sleeves, revealing her white wrists. Chapter 2474. Then without saying a word, she went straight to the kitchen. The cook washed the vegetables. Yi Yuxuan cooked by himself. He rarely cooked by himself, but if Wei Wei Bai asked, he would do it himself. For him, cooking was just a matter of looking at the recipe and then accurately copying the finished product. It was not difficult. Seeing Yi Yuxuan enter the kitchen, Wei Wei Bai sat down casually, sitting in the position where Yi Yuxuan just sat. She asked calmly, "What's wrong with Xian Xian?" Qin Xiu whispered excitedly. He took dozens of sleeping pills the second time. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Is his body okay? Qin Xiu was silent for a moment, then looked at the nurse next to him. The nurse immediately shook her head. There is no life-threatening reaction. Only his physical fitness is lower than normal. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Later, I'll take him to the hospital. If he's okay, don't force him to say anything. In fact, she just didn't want Yi Yuxuan to drive Qin Xiu crazy. Seeing Qin Xiu so excited and worried, while Yi Yuxuan was completely indifferent, she panicked for Qin Xiu. She was really worried that one day Qin Xiu and Yi Yuxuan would turn against each other. After all, who has been with an emotionless machine for a long time? No matter how much feelings they had, they would be worn away. Qin Xiu's identity was also special. The Yi family was a century-old family. It was full of branches and leaves. And Qin Xiu's generation was infinitely distant from the Yi family. But reluctantly, Qin Xiu was a grandson of the Qi family who had no relationship with his uncle. He was a generation older than Yi Yuxuan, although the Yi family looked at strength, not seniority. But it was normal for Yi Yuxuan to call Qin Xiu uncle, because Qin Xiu began to treat Yi Yuxuan's emotional deficit until now. It had been 10 years. He had been paying attention to Yi Yuxuan's illness since he was 18 years old. Even if Yi Yuxuan had no feelings for her, she still called him respectfully. Now, Yi Yuxuan began to feel emotional fluctuations. He hadn't seen many decent brothers around him that he could get along with. If Qin Xiu was gone, what if he regrets it in the future? Sigh. Ever since she decided to devote herself to Yi Yuxuan, she really had to worry about his friendship. Qin Xiu frowned with a helpless expression. Finally, under the calm gaze of Wei Wei Bai, he wiped his tears and said, "You don't know, little Wei Wei. Xian Xian really hurt my heart. He ruined his own body like this. How can I face his dead parents?" Wei Wei Bai, Yi Yuxuan's parents are dead? Oh, it was probably when she was his fiancée. He had a slight impression that it was difficult to kill a machine. Qin Xiu sighed. And if he doesn't live to be 70 years old, how can I take out my 1 billion assets? Wei Wei Bai, who was still moved by his feelings for Yi Yuxuan. Wait, say that again. What is 1 billion assets? Qin Xiu said with a deep melancholy face. When I first saw him, my father said to me that the Yi family had done a great favor to the Qin family, and I must repay the favor. Wei Wei Bai, so you're here to repay the favor? The 1 billion just now was a slip of the tongue, it must be. In fact, it was because of the strong brotherhood that he was so anxious. Qin Xiu grinned. Who in this day and age wants to repay the favor from 180 years ago? It's none of my business. Wei Wei Bai, Qin Xiu pulled a long face again. In the end, my father said that if I cured Xian Xian, I could inherit the family property. My family has a whole 1 billion in the bank, and it's still cash. By Wei Wei, at the slash to read, at https://www.sashu. Com at https://www.sashu. Com to read the at https://m. Sashu. Com. Chapter 2475. Qin Xiu's face was tangled. In the end, Xian Xian couldn't be cured. My father could only take a step back and said that if I could guarantee that he would live to 70, I could get the family property. Wei Bai, Qin Xiu, 1 billion. Wei Bai, don't say 1 billion. She wants to lose her memory. Screw your friendship. Qin Xiu saw her shocked face. Suddenly he laughed. No, you really believe such a lousy reason. Although I can't make 1 billion, it's easy to live a rich life. If I really live to 70, I'll be so old that my teeth will fall out. Even if you give me 10 billion, it's useless. Wei Bai stretched out her hand and rubbed her face tiredly. Oh, so you're so worried about his health because of your love for him. Qin Xiu laughed and clapped his hands. Yes, he's my brother. If I'm not worried about his health, who is? But my father did say that if he cured him, he would give me 1 billion. Wei Bai, he has feelings now, he should get better. Qin Xiu, I know, so I called my father a few days ago and asked him to prepare 1 billion for me. Wei Bai, Qin Xiu said to himself, so Xian has to survive these few days and let my father see him healthy. Wei Bai silently got up and pulled out a decorative ancient sword from the wall. The blade swayed, and she rushed to Qin Xiu with the sword. Bai Changyan immediately stopped her. My daughter, your Uncle Qin is also anxious, so he speaks without thinking. Don't be angry. Wei Bai's face darkened. No dinner tonight, only the head. He even joked about Yi Yuxuan's health problems. Did he think she was dead? Wei Bai with the sword kicked old Father Bai and Qin Xiu out. The door was slammed shut. Seeing that the nurse was still there, she opened the door again. The nurse obediently bowed her head and walked out faster than anyone else. The door was closed again. Several people lined up in a line and stood at the door. Finally, old man Bai said, Is it okay to joke like this? Uncle Qin said, I thought the atmosphere was too serious, so I wanted to liven up a bit. Who knew that Wei would be so easily teased? Old man Bai, isn't she worried about her man's health? Uncle Qin said, Yes, our daughter really likes Xian. After saying that, he felt that there was something strange about the way he addressed her. Wei Bai carried her sword and chased them away with a dark expression. She was still in a bad mood, because she was even hungrier. She turned around and saw Yi Yuxuan wiping the water off her fingers with a handkerchief as she walked out of the kitchen. He calmly glanced at the sword in her hand. His dark and calm eyes did not have a trace of strange fluctuation. On the other hand, Wei Bai shamelessly put the sword back. Yi Yuxuan's eyes were indifferent, but she couldn't help but smile. His tone became gentle. Time to eat. Wei Bai immediately ran off to eat. After they finished eating, the sky had turned dark. Wei Bai came out of the shower. She racked her brains, but could not figure out why Yi Yuxuan suddenly wanted to take sleeping pills. Could it be that he encountered something that made him unhappy? She walked into the living room and saw that Yi Yuxuan's face was a little pale. He looked down at the documents calmly. She heard that after sleeping for 3 days this time, there were more documents. Old man Bai came today not only to see his daughter, but also to drag half a car full of documents. He was thick-skinned enough to ask his son-in-law to deal with them. Wei Bai walked over and opened the documents. Then she stared at him. Yi Yuxuan's expression was still calm, but he pressed his lips together a little harder. His thin lips had lost their healthy color. He stretched out his fingers and touched the documents on the table, but he did not open them. Her beautiful fingertips also gave off a thin and transparent feeling. Wei Bai finally asked in a serious tone, Why did you suddenly take sleeping pills? Yi Yuxuan lowered his eyes to hide the tightness in his eyes. After thinking for a while, he finally looked up again. His eyes were obscure. His complexion was so delicate that it was unhealthy, and his thin red lips were a little dry. After a long silence, he finally said hesitantly, I can't sleep. /save button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 2476. Yi Yuxuan, who had always dealt with everything without changing his expression. When he said this, his fingers couldn't help but clench. His calm face didn't show a trace of inappropriate expression, but the strength of his fingertips added a trace of nervousness. Wei Bai felt that this answer was a little unexpected. This wasn't the first time he had taken sleeping pills. Last time, he had fooled her by saying that he wanted to experience the feeling of sleeping longer with sleeping pills. This wasn't something Yi Yuxuan would do. He was just short of putting a computer on his face. Everything that entered his eyes was a calculation of data. How could he let himself take so many pills because of a wrong estimation? Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly and finally said, "Is it really insomnia?" Yi Yuxuan knew that if he showed a trace of something wrong, she would definitely be able to tell. Just like if she lied, she wouldn't be professional enough. He could easily see through it. So his expression was still calm. His beautiful black eyes quietly looked up, clear and beautiful. His deep voice had a hint of husky magnetism because of depression. "Yes, insomnia. It's the first time in my life that I've encountered such a problem. I'm a little helpless." His tone was clearly so calm. Yi Yuxuan's cold face didn't have a trace of fragile expression. Even his sitting posture still had the strong temperament of a superior. On his neat sleeves, the golden cufflinks reflected a light. A noble and elegant man, even if he said something that made him feel helpless. He didn't feel the slightest bit uneasy. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, which looked even more delicate and bright red. She asked softly, "When did you start to have insomnia?" Yi Yuxuan's eyes moved. He tapped the table with his fingertips and said calmly, "More than a month." It was a conservative time. He tried his best not to let his lie reveal any flaws. He didn't want to lie to her, even if it was for her own good. But he couldn't tell the truth. After all, whether it was that thing that was neither male nor female, or him following her and experiencing one realistic dream after another, these were all strange things to him. A lot of his professional knowledge was useless. Therefore, for the time being, they could only gather as much information as possible instead of solving the problem. He had to grasp the truth of what she had done. As for the thing that had been attached to her body, no matter what, it was still there. His heart was filled with suspicion. Before everything was clear, he had to suppress these things so as not to burden her. Therefore, Yi Yuxuan was extremely calm, but she sighed faintly in her heart. His face was pale and haggard. There was a faint shadow under his eyes, which was very obvious under the light. Suddenly, a pair of gentle hands, as careful as feathers, landed on his beautiful shoulders. Her fingers caressed his fair neck inch by inch, as if she was comforting a child. Her fingertips ran through his dry and smooth hair, and finally she naturally pressed herself against him. She pressed his head into her arms. Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyes, and the look in her eyes was incredibly gentle. Her body was slightly bent, and her long hair fell messily on his back. This was a very warm and protective action. "Why didn't you say you couldn't sleep?" Her voice was low and soft, like fluff, with a fragrance that almost blended into his breath. Although it was a question, it didn't have any offensive power. //T. Chapter 2477. Yi Yuxuan was stunned for a moment, and even a little tipsy. He was such a tall person, but he didn't feel awkward leaning against her slender and weak body. Wei Wei Bai's lips were almost touching his forehead, and she comforted him softly. "We have many ways to treat insomnia. Don't take sleeping pills in the future, okay?" She put away her cold and sharp edges. She poured out all the softness in her heart, just so that this man wouldn't hurt her. Her soft words were like a breeze, making the eyelashes of the man in her arms tremble, and his deep cold eyes were tinged with a trace of moisture. His breathing paused for a few seconds, and his cold and calm expression softened. Then he reached out and pressed his hand on her back. He didn't use much strength, but there was a sense of possessiveness. In the future, his voice was like a murmur, pleasing to the ear like the sound of zither strings and with a lazy hoarseness. "I'm not taking any more." Wei Wei Bai narrowed her eyes, and her gentle eyes were full of smiles. Yi Yuxuan became Yi Guai Guai. It seemed that after too much insomnia, a robot like Yi Yuxuan's intelligence would also decrease. Even acting spoiled was coming. In Wei Wei Bai's eyes, the soft and cute Yi Yuxuan was acting spoiled. Yi Yuxuan, who quietly let her hug him, also had a smile in his deep black eyes, although it was a little to divert her attention. But her sudden hug was indeed unexpectedly beautiful. Wei Wei Bai treated Yi Yuxuan's insomnia. First, she carried out a series of psychological interrogation. The company closed down. The amount in the bank account decreased. The house was too small. Yi Yuxuan calmly shuffled the poker cards and slowly dealt the cards. Then he refuted one by one. The company was doing well. The account number was increasing by the minute. The house was indeed a little small, but to make a certain girl like it, it was cozy to be small. Wei Wei Bai didn't like those luxurious castles in the suburbs. She liked cozy apartments. He only realized Wei Wei Bai's preferences one by one after doing some research. Wei Wei Bai felt that she had been flirted with, but she had no evidence. Moreover, Yi Yuxuan's perfect life really destroyed her stingy and petty heart. He lacked nothing and lived a prosperous life. She thought about the bitter days when she had to split a single piece into 2 flowers. No matter what, she was still a rich young lady who didn't have to worry about food and clothing. She was also the CEO of one of the top companies in the industry. Her life could be considered to be luxurious. She didn't have to worry about food and clothing, and she could buy whatever she wanted unless she didn't transmigrate. Wei Wei Bai thought of the poor ghost plane that she sometimes transmigrated to. There was no need to talk about the sadness and tears, especially the existence of the system, which reminded her of her poverty every day. No matter how rich she was now, she still felt like a pauper. There was a poor system that was so fucking affected. She couldn't interrogate Yi Yuxuan anymore. Otherwise, it would be her turn to suffer from insomnia. Wei Wei Bai had a distressed expression. She held a poker card and played it too. She had nothing to do after eating, and she was worried that Yi Yuxuan didn't get enough sleep because he overworked. So she pulled him to play a relaxing poker game. This kind of simple game was good for soothing the nerves before sleep. Yi Yuxuan looked at his cards calmly. He knew what cards she was holding. He even knew the positions of the cards that he had shuffled, the stack of cards that he hadn't used on the table. This kind of game was actually extremely boring. But he calmly pursed his lips and rubbed the cards with his fingertips. His eyes quietly glanced at Wei Wei Bai, who was sitting opposite him. Address of the full text: https://www. Sashu. Com address of the Chapter 2478. The collar of her pajamas was a little loose. There were traces of water vapor on her white and tender skin. It felt like the sparkling pastry was covered with icing. Just looking at her made him feel sweet. If she was willing, he could sit like this for the rest of his life and feel happy. Wei Wei Bai held the cards and looked at Yi Yuxuan blankly. What's wrong? Why was she suddenly in a daze? The daisy Yi Yuxuan was also very cute. She felt that she was done for. She could forget that she was dreaming about Yi Yuxuan. In reality, she was already a perverted old aunt. Why was she drooling over Yi Yuxuan? She even felt that the other party was the cute little Red Riding Hood. She was the dark and ferocious big bad wolf, ready to pounce on him at any time. Yi Yuxuan calmly put away the emotions in his eyes. His thin lips curled up slightly, and then he said calmly, "Pass." Wei Wei Bai didn't think much and continued playing cards. The system looked at Yi Dada's cards. Relying on his awesome shuffling skills, he held all the good cards in his hands. Then, when the host played a bigger card, he kept passing. So, he was holding the good cards by himself? Wei Wei Bai felt very happy playing cards with Yi Yuxuan. They were evenly matched, but she used her awesome card skills to beat him every time with a small advantage. Geniuses also had things they weren't good at. Look, he couldn't play cards as well as her. Bai Shuerong's heart was greatly satisfied. The system, on the other hand, watched an extremely boring game from beginning to end. God Yi was changing the card again. His technique was even better than the God of Gamblers, just to give the host a good card. God Yi was calculating the position of each card again. This was to let the host experience the surprise of being able to get a good card no matter how she played. God Yi was giving the host good card again. He was worried that he would accidentally win the host, so he simply gave him bad cards. And the host, from the beginning to the end, he foolishly thought that his card skills were awesome. All of a sudden, the system felt that it was really embarrassing to have such a host. But what could he do? If he were to lose face, wouldn't he be the host? If he recognized a host, he would have to hold on to her with tears in his eyes, even if he had to kneel. After playing mahjong, Wei Wei Bai couldn't stand Yi Yuxuan anymore. She secretly yawned. She covered her mouth and glanced at him. However, she found that this dog man's eyes were extremely bright. His beautiful black eyes were shining brightly. It was as if he could stay up all night for a year without sleeping. She finally believed that he had insomnia. Even though she was so good at staying up all night, she still felt sleepy. However, the more he played, the more excited he got. Yi Yuxuan lowered her eyes and shuffled the cards slowly. Those brand new and messy cards were like tamed soldiers under his beautiful and slender fingertips. They were incomparably obedient. After shuffling the cards, Yi Yuxuan slowly got up and rolled up her sleeves, revealing her wrist joints. And by Wei Wei's sluggish eyes, he easily carried her in his arms. Time to sleep. It's 12 o'clock. She slept too much. That was why he tolerated her sleeping until 12 o'clock. If she stayed for a few more days, he would set a rule that she had to go to bed at 10 o'clock. People with bad hearts had to strictly control their diet and rest schedule. Wei Wei Bai knocked her head against his chest. Her face was pressed against his clothes. Her nose was filled with the pleasant smell of his body. She couldn't help but sniff. This smell. Why did she feel like she was a pervert? Wei Wei Bai hurriedly suppressed her impulsive actions. When she rubbed against his clothes, Yi Yuxuan's eyes deepened, but his actions didn't change at all. /crossover system. Adonis, come here crossover system. Adonis, come here crossover system. Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 2479. He stuffed her back onto the bed. He conveniently pulled the blanket over her body. Yi Yuxuan was like a serious worker. His fingers were very professional and gentle as he smoothed her long hair. He didn't want to get a headache from being pressed down. Wei Wei Bai stared at him obediently. Although she forced her eyelids open, she still wanted to sleep. How could she sleep so much? She had slept for 3 days and still wanted to sleep. However, Wei Wei Bai thought about what had happened in the past 3 days. She had lived in this world for so many years and had so many worries. It was natural for her to feel sleepy, although she had a realistic body and didn't need to work. But she was mentally exhausted. Yi Yuxuan sat by the bed, turned off the lights, and turned on the small bedside lamp. He leaned against the bed and lowered his head. His movements were casual and elegant as he reached out and gently stroked her long hair. His dark and hoarse voice had a sexy texture in the dark night. Go to sleep. If you can't sleep, I'll tell you a fairy tale. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. But like fairy tales, she wanted to hear adult. Cough, cough, cough. Don't ask. If you ask again, the comments will fly. Wei Wei Bai stared at him for a long time under the dim light. His side profile was perfect and hazy, like the beauty of an elf in the dark night. It was very impactful. Wei Wei Bai quickly blinked and shook off the temptation of the beauty in front of her. Then she asked, Are you really having insomnia? Yi Yuxuan's eyes were too bright. He was so energetic, waiting for her to fall asleep. He probably wouldn't be able to sleep. She didn't know why, but she imagined him sitting alone in the dark. He looked like he was alone and lonely. Thinking of this, she felt a little embarrassed that she fell asleep so carelessly. It was better to ask politely. This way, he wouldn't seem so cold and heartless when he fell asleep later. Yi Yuxuan didn't answer. Instead, he stared at her quietly. His eyes were a deep black, but because of some kind of emotion, this darkness seemed incomparably soft. Finally, he lowered his head and gently kissed her forehead. Then he murmured against her skin, Then I can sleep. A simple kiss on the forehead that would allow him to escape from the nightmare that had lasted for nearly 1,000 years. The most difficult part was that he had spent 100 years raising her with everything he had. She was hidden in an emotionless lotus flower. It was too difficult, even if Yi Yuxuan thought about it now. They all felt pain and discomfort and were close to collapse. What hurt him the most was that the moment he awakened, he saw her destroying his 100 years of hard work. He turned around and left. That cold back view was just like the one in his countless dreams. He had never stopped even once. As long as her soul could leave, It didn't matter how long she stayed. She wanted to leave. Through the dream world, he selfishly felt that it was good. But after following him in the past, he could better understand the heavy sorrow. This was also why he lost control and pulled her into that dangerous place. Just to scare her. This was a wrong thing to do. Yi Yuxuan calmly reflected on himself. He definitely couldn't do such a thing to her next time, especially since that golden-eyed body had another huge force. Moreover, Yi Yuxuan's calm eyes were extremely repressed. Her experience in the dream was probably due to her repressed feelings. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been affected so little. Was it done by that thing that was neither male nor female? Yi Yuxuan's brain was used to calculating and reasoning again. Before he could figure out, someone tugged at his sleeve. The force made his cufflinks crooked. Yi Yuxuan blinked his eyes a little sluggishly, and then finally lowered his head to look at her. He found that half of Wei Wei Bai's face was hidden under the blanket, revealing a pair of sparkling eyes, like a cute little animal. She spoke tentatively. "Why don't we sleep together?" Yi Yuxuan looked at her silently and didn't answer, but his dark eyes became dangerous. Wei Wei Bai said, "You can't sleep. If you can't sleep, you can still chat with me." Yi Yuxuan realized that he was wrong. Sleeping together turned out to be purely about sleeping together. He could only blame himself for having such a deep experience after going with her soul. Those messy and sweet experiences still remained in his bones. Thinking of her charming appearance in the lotus, his Adam's apple couldn't help but move. Yi Yuxuan suppressed his rapid breathing rate and slowly lifted the blanket. Then he lay down on the bed. The next moment, a warm and soft body burrowed into his arms. A muffled voice came from under the blanket. "You can sleep if I hug you." Yi Yuxuan's body stiffened a little, and then he relaxed. He couldn't help but smile a little more. Then he lowered his head and kissed her hair. "Yes, I can sleep if you hug me." To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 2480. Wei Wei Bai stayed longer this time. She left it especially for Yi Yuxuan. It was specially left for Yi Yuxuan. This sentence had to be emphasized. After all, her father didn't let her stay for more than a few days. For Yi Yuxuan's insomnia, she had to stay up late with him every time. In the end, she had to hug him to sleep. She was afraid that Yi Yuxuan would trick her. She even asked the system to check if he was asleep. The system said, "Yes, he's asleep." After receiving the system's affirmative answer, Wei Wei Bai nodded in satisfaction. It was good that he was asleep. At first, she didn't think it was a big deal to have another person on the bed. The two of them slept peacefully in each other's arms for a few days. When she felt that it was about time and planned to leave the next day, she woke up in the middle of the night. She didn't know if it was because she was thinking about something. She couldn't help but look up at Yi Yuxuan to see if he was asleep. After all, the system also needed to sleep sometimes. If Yi Yuxuan woke up while the system was sleeping, what would she do if he couldn't sleep? In the middle of the night, the lights were dim. Most of Yi Yuxuan's arm was pressed down by her head, while the other hand was placed on her back. Usually, he was always cold and aloof. But when he was asleep, he was still cold. Especially after hugging him to sleep for a few days, his complexion was visibly better. Even the lost color on his lips was thicker, like a rose blooming in the dark night, cold and beautiful. Wei Wei Bai stared at him for a long time. She made sure that his breathing was stable and that he had no intention of waking up. Only then did she let out a sigh of relief. Wei Wei Bai held her breath and quickly called the system. "System, let's go, let's go." The system was woken up. He rubbed his eyes and pulled the woolen hat on his head. Then he yawned and said to the host, "Okay, close your eyes." Bai Weiwei immediately closed her eyes. Her vision turned black and she lost consciousness. The system's tiny hands and feet carefully carried her white soul out. He didn't know if it was an illusion. The white soul seemed to have an additional layer of faint gold. Just as the system took him into its arms, it saw Yi Yuxuan open his eyes. His dark and deep eyes were filled with a cold vigilance. Tong Chung shuddered and almost threw the host's soul out. Not sleeping in the middle of the night, was she trying to scare Tong to death? Yi Yuxuan stared at the system in silence for a while before whispering, "Take good care of her." The system immediately nodded obediently. Then it hugged the host and took a few steps back. Without another word, it started to run. Deep in the night, on a soft bed. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. / crossover system, Adonis, come here. / crossover system, Adonis, come here. Download crossover system, Adonis, come here. Mobile the save button below to record this reading record. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 2481. Wei Wei Bai slept peacefully in his arms, but her soul was no longer here. Yi Yuxuan's clear eyes didn't have the drowsiness of having just woken up. He reached out and touched his lips with his fingertips. The kiss she left just now was still there. He exerted strength in his arms and pulled her completely into his embrace. The warmth of her body close to his made him squint. Then he lowered his head, took her lips, and kissed her deeply. He was afraid of scaring her, so he kept a quiet and obedient image. But in essence, he was still the aggressive and possessive kind of person. In the past, he had no emotional fluctuations. He didn't understand anything. Now he slowly understood. He also knew why his personality was more paranoid and crazy in every dream. Maybe in his nature, this kind of personality took up most of the time. Yi Yuxuan let go of her, but his embrace was still strong. His lips rubbed against her hair, full of her scent. His deep eyes were stained with a bit of broken light, full of satisfaction and deep. Then Yi Yuxuan slowly closed his eyes, not relying on sleeping pills. It was fine as long as he hugged her to sleep. Wei Wei Bai heard a rumbling sound, and a strange stench pervaded the air. Before she opened her eyes, her eyelids twitched. It seemed like the environment was a bit bad. Then she finally opened her tired eyelids and found herself sitting on a shabby mahogany chair inlaid with bronze. The style of this chair, although shabby, was gorgeous. It was similar to the structure of her cocoa. She was wearing an extremely dark robe. The robe was the kind that had no lines, and there was even a hood on the back. In front of her was a large pot. Thick green liquid was slowly boiling, making a rumbling sound. Some splashed out from time to time. It fell to the floor, corroding a terrible mark. Next to the pot was a desk, and there were all kinds of strange materials on the table. There were also plants, dried snakes, and lizards in a mess. In the middle of the table was a thick stack of parchment books. A quill was casually dipped in ink and thrown on top of the notebook. This strange environment was so strange that Wei Wei Bai was stunned. He had never seen such a style of plain decoration before. She forced herself to move her neck and called out. The system immediately responded, "Coming. Do you want to receive the memory?" Wei Wei Bai felt that her neck was a little sore. Perhaps it was because she had fallen asleep in the chair. Receive. Although this environment looked strange, she was the only one here. He didn't seem to be in any danger, except for the pot of green cuisine. Familiar memories flooded into her mind, and her patience increased a lot. The headache wasn't that bad either. With great difficulty, she sorted out the memories in her mind. Was she a witch on this plane? The identity of a witch sounded like it was tied to a stake. She thought of the fate of those who were labeled as witches in history. Wei Wei Bai felt a chill run down her spine. This was a special plane. It was a world of Western magic. There were all kinds of strange creatures that Wei Wei Bai had never seen before. There were also elves, mermaids, magicians, dragons, and so on. Two of the biggest forces had fought on this continent for 1,000 years. They were the witches and the light magicians. In the end, the light magicians succeeded and killed more than 90% of the witches. Then they established the Church of Light. They specialized in capturing and killing the remaining witches who escaped. // Chapter 2482. In this plane, Bai Wei Wei had the identity of a witch, but a very inferior kind of witch. Because her mother was a witch before she was killed by the Church of Light. She left everything to her only daughter. But her daughter was a bad student and could not do anything. She used up a lot of good things from the witches and was forced into a corner by the Church of Light. She finally gave up on herself. She used all the materials and planned to make her own witch servant. Then she killed the archbishop of the church to avenge her mother. The so-called witch servant was a puppet made with the spells of the necromancer and the witch's secret medicine. The puppet would only listen to its master, and the power of the puppet was determined by the corpse. If the corpse was a light mage when it was alive, in that case, the refined puppet would also be a light mage. The original owner went to the mass grave and searched for a long time, and finally used some equipment to measure the fluctuation of light magic on a corpse. Although the fluctuation was a little strange, but there was still light magic. With light magic, one could enter the church and not be discovered. Then they could kill the archbishop who killed their mother. So the original owner rolled up her sleeves and made the secret medicine, but in the process she failed and died. She died too casually. Was this the treatment of a roadside cannon fodder? Wei Wei Bai felt pain in her neck because the corpse's neck happened to hit the chair. Wei Wei Bai could not help but reach out to rub her poor neck, but she found that she was holding something in her hand. It was heavy and smooth. She looked down blankly and found that she was holding a thigh bone, a human thigh bone. The bright white color was simply dazzling to the eyes. Wei Wei Bai, then her fingers trembled and she wanted to throw it. But she heard the system say, "This is the male lead's thigh bone. Don't throw it, or he will be a cripple." Wei Wei Bai had a bad feeling in her heart. Huh? What the hell? The system said, "Look behind the cauldron." Wei Wei Bai grabbed the thigh bone and walked behind the cauldron with a strange expression. Then, he saw a chair appear. On the chair, a human skeleton appeared. He had long legs and long arms, and his height was very standard. The skull's face shape was also standard. If it had meat, it would be the face of a handsome guy. Of course, no matter how standard it was still a skeleton. No wonder she would have nightmares about skeletons when she returned to reality from the previous dimension. Was that the legendary Omen dream? Ding! Target Xiao West. This mission is to obtain Xiao West's love. Target, Xiavist. Progress, 0. Time, temporary. The corners of Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. What's Sire West? He's just Skeleton West. How do we attack this place? Just tell us how. Not only did he die, he even turned into a skeleton. Strategy my ass. Wei Wei Bai raised her hand and was about to throw away the heavy bone in her finger. But thinking of something, she suppressed the violent primitive power in her body and carefully put the leg bone back on Xiao's leg. A perfect skeleton. It was an eyesore. The system said earnestly, "Let's just say he's the male lead." I didn't guess wrong. Wei Wei Bai, it doesn't matter if the time is fixed, but how do I attack a dead person? Do I have to summon his soul? The system thought for a while and finally thought, didn't the information say to make a puppet? You could try. Wei Wei Bai, a puppet is also a dead thing. Isn't it just a marionette? / Chapter 2483. Even if a puppet could move, it would not have feelings. The system said there's a 1 in 10 chance that the puppet will gain sentience, but the potion needs to be especially successful. Wei Wei Bai thought about those memories, then ran to the table and flipped through the notes. After a quick look, he did find some specific opportunities. A witch's servant would have their own sentience when they were alive. However, it was very dangerous to awaken the servant's sentience, because once the servant had a lot of power and remembered what happened when they were alive, then the servant could break free from the power of the contract and could even kill the witch. Many witches would avoid the danger of awakening their servant's sentience. Wei Wei Bai narrowed her eyes and finally said, "System, you do it. This potion needs precise calculation. It's too difficult for a human, especially since she was not a witch. She did not have black magic. The stability of her fingers was not enough to control the data of the potion. The system said, "Okay, I'll get you a small scale, and then I'll calculate the data of the potion. You just need to throw the potion into the pot." Wei Wei Bai rolled up her sleeves and nodded in agreement. As she began to fumble with the potion, the skeleton on the seat slowly emitted golden light spots. The light spots were hidden in the bones and could not be seen clearly if one did not look carefully. When Xiaya regained consciousness, he saw a petite figure running back and forth. When he went through the undead phase, he was attacked by the dragons, causing him to fall into the crack of time and space as a necromancer's final form. The final form of a necromancer was a skeleton. He did not know how long he had lost consciousness. Was this a witch's house? He could not move, and he could not even control his vision. His empty eyes were dark, and the places he could see were fixed. Everywhere he looked, there were little things hanging there. They were all shabby, not worth mentioning, and looked like trash. If this was really a witch's house, it was too shabby. Also, shouldn't witches be destroyed? Before he awakened his power, he gave the order to destroy witches. He should have been gone for a few years, but those useless people from the church still haven't done what he ordered. A trace of dark red light flashed through Xiaya's dark eyes. He sat quietly on the old, classical wooden chair. His slender fingers rested silently on his leg bones. The cold bones had a layer of beautiful moonlight luster. He tried to move his finger, but found that the binding power of the Dragon Clan was too strong. He wanted to digest the power in his body. It would take some time. Once the power of the Dragon Clan was fully digested, it would be the death of the Dragon Clan. Xiaya's neck drooped. He was quiet and cold. His pale skull gave off a delicate and smooth feeling. Wei Bai and the system were seriously staring at the potion. Wei Bai casually asked, "What is the identity of this Xiaya guy?" The system glanced at the information. "Shiagist, none." The system replied, "He probably died too long ago, so he doesn't have an identity." Not only was the time waiting, but the male lead's information was also gone. Yi Xian's dog couldn't have followed him over, right? He was simply a big wolf dog that would not let go of its host. Wei Bai felt that perhaps he had really died for too long. After all, there was not a single bit of decay on his bones. He was probably a passerby in the past. This was also good. There was no conflict of interest or hatred. Wei Bai carefully threw the last bit of the potion into the pot. // Chapter 2484. The system was a little guilty because it couldn't find the male lead's information. It glanced at the supermarket. Wow, there was the first beauty medal. Wait, there was also the magic immunity medal of the Church of Light. They were all discounted, and the price was about the same. He counted his little treasury. He could buy one and get snacks as a gift. It was a good deal. So he immediately said, "The side reward is here. This time you have a choice. There is the first beauty medal and the immunity medal of the Church of Light. Which one do you want?" After that, the system felt that it still had to give a suggestion. The light medal is good. You are now being hunted and will be tied up and burned by the church. With the medal, you can leave and become a light mage. In this plane, the host was actually in danger. Witches were killed without mercy on sight. Wei Bai also thought about it seriously. Then she compromised and said, "Indeed, the light medal is too useful for me. I don't have any ability now, and I'm still a witch. If I am caught, I will definitely die." So, the system was just about to buy the light medal. It heard the host shout firmly, "I want the first beauty." The host waved his fist and said, "For the first beauty, what is death?" The host was so excited that he almost burst his clothes. Money is precious, but the value of life is higher. If it is for beauty, I will throw it all away. The system, why do you want to block the host? It couldn't control the urge to cut ties with the host. After a few minutes of calmness, the system finally pressed the button to buy the first beauty medal with tears in his eyes. The purchase of the light medal came with a small biscuit. The first beauty didn't. His heart was aching. Wei Bai heard a ding sound, and the first beauty medal entered her body. The system said weakly, "All right, your appearance has changed. No matter whether the people in this plane have seen you or not, your appearance has always been like this since you were young. Even if there's a portrait, it will automatically change and refresh." To ensure that the host's changed appearance would not reveal any flaws, no matter how the information was checked. She had been like this since she was young. As for why the first beauty didn't cause a sensation, this question, the discounted medal, didn't care. It only cared about the beauty modification, not the evaluation of outsiders. While Wei Wei Bai was waiting for the metal to activate, the potion was also completed. Such a large pot of dark and terrifying cuisine was turned into a small bottle of purple potion. She picked up the potion and turned to leave, but her robe was too long. She stepped on the wrong foot and threw herself forward. Afraid that she would drop the potion, she raised her hands high and face down. Then he thought of her face, the face of the number one beauty. Immediately, a huge burst of energy erupted from his body. He exerted force in his legs and threw himself even further away. His entire body crashed into the skeleton's ribs. It was even more painful than falling to the ground. Wei Wei Bai held the potion in one hand and covered her face with the other. Her petite body was almost lying on Skeleton's knee. Her long hair fell into the gap between her ribs. Her brown curly hair intertwined with her white bones, giving her a strange sense of beauty. Wei Wei Bai only felt that it was horrifying. She touched her nose, and tears rolled out of her eyes because of the pain. Then, she raised her head and saw the skull coldly staring at her with its pitch-black eyes. If she didn't know that he was dead, she would have thought that he was looking at her. Because of the pain, she frowned and her lips were tightly pursed. Then, she carefully observed the potion, worried that it would spill. In Xiaoya's line of sight, the petite girl was lying on his body. She slightly raised her curly, thick eyelashes, and the corners of her eyes were wet with mist. Her soft white skin was stained with a blush, making her look exceptionally charming. She seemed to be aware of something. Her watery eyes looked up, revealing her white and flawless neck under the large and ill-fitting robe. The thin lines of her shoulders and neck were delicate and would break with a snap. Like the crystal bottle he used to place in his room as a decoration, the red rose stuck in the bottle and stained with the morning mist. Too beautiful to be real. His pitch-black eyes flashed with a strange red light. Wei Wei Bai didn't see it. She just happened to pour the potion into his mouth. The purple potion instantly soaked the skeleton's body. Wei Wei Bai also heard it. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 5. She was just about to wonder why there was a favorability. Then, she heard again. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 0. By Wei Wei. At the slash. Read at https://www.sashu.com//. Read at https://m/sasha.com. Chapter 2485. The magic potion had just been poured in, and he already had a change in favorability. The effect of the potion here was so awesome. Or was it because it was digested with bones, so there was no middleman and it could take effect in 1 second? Just now, the purple magic potion entered his mouth. The liquid was like when it was alive, directly rushing into his bones, and every bone turned purple. The purple light covered the pale white bones, strange and gorgeous. Wei Wei Bai stood at the side, watching the purple light suddenly being wrapped in a golden gray fog. On the pale white bones, countless golden gray fog was rolling. The internal organs and flesh quickly attached to the bones and grew. Golden gray light spots filled the sky. In the countless light spots on the slender body, pure white and flawless skin appeared with a sickly, exquisite feeling. Beautiful fingers without a single callus. Like the white rose petals raised by nobles, the silk-like, delicate fingertips gracefully and naturally hung down. Under the thick and fluffy honey-colored curly hair, under the young man's half-closed eyelashes, a pair of gray-purple eyes hazy with a deep sexiness. His thin lips were as red as a rose, and even without a smile, there was a kind of breathtaking charm. He was delicate, perfect, and had nothing to do with frailty. It made Wei Wei Bai touch her face suspiciously. Could it be that the system gave the number 1 beauty medal to the wrong person? This brother of Xiaoya's was too beautiful. His naked body was like a work of art meticulously sculpted by the creator. Golden ratio, purple eyes, exquisite appearance. Bai Weiwei felt a little jealous. What was going on? If they walked out together, she would definitely be suppressed by him without explanation. She glanced at the middle of his legs. Stab, stab. That undisguised gaze made the motionless, puppet-like young man's eyes darken. As expected, a licentious and evil witch. She was actually so licentious and shameless. Ding, the male lead's favorability is -2. Wei Bai, she wanted to calm down. Calm down. She didn't do anything, right? She didn't kill his family. She didn't stab him. She didn't say she loved him while stabbing him. Why did the favorability drop for no reason? And wasn't the magic potion not completely digested? How can the favorability increase and decrease? Could it be that the consciousness came first and then the body moved? Wei Bai looked down at him strangely. His eyelashes didn't move and his eyes were dull. He was like a corpse. She stood in front of him, curiously tilted her head. Her long brown curly hair fell to her shoulders, and her expression was extremely focused. But because her appearance was too sweet, instead of the uncomfortable feeling of observation, instead, it was a kind of softly rubbing the depths of her eyes. The young man couldn't move his line of sight as he looked into her curious and adorable eyes. The girl's eyes were not like those of other witches who had turned black because they had learned dark magic. Instead, it was a kind's. Her hair color was similar to his. This color. This little witch's black magic must be extremely bad. The more powerful one's black magic was, the darker the color of their hair and eyes would be. She must be lazy and not put in any effort to study. This kind of trash is more annoying than evil witches. Ding! The male lead's favorability is -5. By Wei. At the / crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Com download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu. Comto facilitate your next reading. You can click on at the bottom to record this reading. Quick. Chapter 2486. Fuck you, what's wrong with her? She didn't molest him yet. She didn't pinch his white and tender face either. She also didn't pull his hair to see if it was sturdy or if it would fall off. Why did the favorability drop again? Wei Bai asked the system what was going on. The system observed and finally managed to deduce a possibility. Probably he's conscious, but he can't move his body, and he's in a bad mood when he sees that he's not wearing any clothes. The male lead's information was incomplete, so there was no way to observe. But as a powerful leader, how could he say something as degrading as "I don't know"? Would it become a Sherlock Holmes system in the future? This made the system feel that life was very difficult. Wei Bai sized up his body. Indeed, it was naked. Ding! The male lead's favorability is -7. Wei Bai. I'm about to lose control and tear the white skeleton. The favorability dropping is addictive, and it can't be stopped, right? If it drops again, do you believe that I'll throw you into the mass grave again? Ding! The male lead's favorability is -10. Uncle, ancestor, I will find clothes for you now. Wei Bai immediately turned around and went to search for clothes. For the sake of the favorability, it could only endure. Xiaya's beautiful eyes drooped. The cold, grayish purple in his half-closed eyes were as beautiful as violets. Although he knew that the evil, which was incomparably licentious. But this was the first time he met someone who dared to be so rude to him. Without any shyness, extremely daring. Directly staring at him, daring to look at Xiaya's drooping eyes, looked at his fingers, no longer in the form of a skeleton, but in the form of a human. That magic medicine clashed with the power of the dragon race. It digested a portion of the dragon race's power. It freed him from his undead state and restored his human appearance. But he still couldn't move. Xiaya quietly drooped his head, his honey-colored curly hair scattered down, and his hazy eyes could be faintly seen. The youth was like an exquisite piece of art. Even if he sat quietly, it was enough to make people go crazy. But no one could see how terrifying the power in his body was. And this power, because of the conflict, caused him to suffer intense pain. Xiaya's grayish-purple eyes showed signs of forbearance. Suddenly, a slightly cold hand landed lightly on his shoulder. Xiao was unable to move. He could only feel the temperature of the girl's fingertips, bringing about a delicate sensation. She draped the coat over him. He even said indifferently, "You'll have to put up with these clothes. I'm very poor, so I'll have to trouble you." This was the first time Xiao had heard someone say the words, "I am very poor," in such a calm and natural tone. Most of them were just trying to look impressive. Saying that they were poor was like insulting the poor. Under his lower gaze, the girl's fingertips meticulously buttoned his shirt. After much difficulty, he finally finished putting on the pants for the puppet boy. Wei Wei Bai wiped her sweat. It didn't look heavy, but it took a lot of energy just to move it. The clothes belonged to the lover of the original owner's mother before she died. Witches had many lovers because of their practice of black magic. As a result, it would affect one's temperament and cause one to become abnormally reckless. He didn't even know who the original owner's father was. So there were many men's clothes in the house, of different sizes. The witches of this world represented evil, licentious, reckless, crazy, and terrifying. Wei Wei Bai finished taking care of the clothes. Then she went to wash the pot. This pot hadn't been washed since it was bought. Wei Wei Bai expressed that she couldn't bear it. Moreover, the house was in such a mess. How could he live? /T. Chapter 2487. She couldn't control it. Although she wasn't a clean freak, she was still a normal person. She didn't have money to hire a maid, and her identity needed to be hidden. Wei Wei Bai could only roll up her sleeves and do the housework herself. More importantly, where did she hide the mirror? After searching for half a day, she still didn't know where to throw it. She hadn't seen the face of her number one beauty yet. The quiet boy was still sitting on the chair like a delicate corpse. The girl was wearing a long robe, clumsily tidying things. She was trying to clean the floor. She took a cloth and squatted on the ground, trying to wipe the dirt. When she brushed against Yaya's feet, she reached out, grabbed his bare feet, and lifted them up. Then she wiped the floor. She didn't even know how to clean up? Wei Wei Bai finally found a mirror after cleaning the house. She picked it up and looked at herself. Her lips were red and her teeth were white. Her skin was so delicate that water could be squeezed out of it. A pair of amber eyes, sweet even if they weren't smiling. Long eyelashes, when trembling, cast a delicate shadow under her eyes. The people in this world had a Western-style appearance. The lines of her face were softer, and there was a subtle beauty of the East. Although she looked pleasing to the eye, she was quite pretty. But the appearance of the number one beauty that could cause the downfall of countries and make people go crazy, it was too far. Wasn't this the enhanced version of the pretty girl next door? The number one beauty should be stunning. It had to be so beautiful that it could shake the heavens and shake the earth. It had to be so flamboyant and reckless that it could explode the plains. She had no attack power, no beauty, and had the appearance of a pitiful little wife. What was the number one beauty? Could it be discounted just because it was a side reward? No, this was simply not the right thing to do. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "I can't even look better than a corpse. How can I be considered the number one beauty?" That Xiaoya's corpse was better looking than hers. Look at him, then look at herself. He was the Tmall seller show. She was the village version. The system was silent for a long time, then said, "The number one beauty refers to the most beautiful of all women. Men are not included. Otherwise, she would be called the number one beauty, not a beauty." Wei Wei Bai. With this kind of appearance, she can't be the best among girls. The system said earnestly, "Don't worry, I said I'll be the first, so I'll definitely be the first." Wei Wei Bai bitterly looked at the mirror and then at Xiaya. He found that although the magic potion allowed the bones to grow flesh, but the corpse still wouldn't move. Could it be that there was a problem with the potion formula? However, since the favorability would decrease, it meant that he was still conscious. It was just that he couldn't move. Wei Wei Bai stood in place and thought for a while before slowly walking in front of the young man. She opened her eyes wide and tried to observe him. The youth's grayish-purple eyes were abnormally still and lifeless. There was not the slightest fluctuation. But in Xiaoya's eyes, he saw her soft and sweet eyes rippling with a clear light. There was only curiosity and pure naivety. He already knew what she was giving him. When he lost consciousness, he was probably mistaken for a corpse and was brought back to be made into a witch servant. Unfortunately, the magic potion had no effect on him. Therefore, she was puzzled as to why it was useless. Shaya calmly thought that after he digested the power of the dragon race, he would capture this presumptuous witch and burn her to death. Suddenly, he felt something. The church's light power appeared. The little witch who was observing him opened her eyes wide in shock and then started to walk around in circles. What should I do? If I'm caught, I'll be burned to death. Chapter 2488. Shaya. All witches should be burned to death. Accept your fate. She was reminded by the system that there were people from the Church of Light searching for Wei Bai in this area. She immediately searched her memory about the original owner of the body. There was a magic wardrobe here. After entering, it could hide 70% to 80% of the black magic aura. Wei Bai immediately ran to open the wardrobe. It was okay. 2 people could squeeze in. After all, Shaya was also restored by black magic, so he would definitely be found. When Shaya saw the little witch, he hurriedly ran away. A faint understanding appeared in his eyes. Running for her life? Just when he thought that the little witch had escaped by herself. The little witch in the inappropriate robe hurriedly ran over again. Then she reached out and hugged him. He was much taller than her. She used all her strength, but could barely drag him step by step. The little witch's breathing was messy and heavy. With every step, her hands and feet trembled violently. He was worried that he would crush her. Her aura did not have the stench of black magic. Instead, it was a kind of rose fragrance. It was exceptionally alluring. Shaya liked roses the most. So when he was promoted to Grand Duke, he bought 80% of the rose varieties in the country. He planted them in the garden. And it was also at that time that his nickname changed from the cold-hearted terminator of evil to the Rose Duke. Wei Bai stuffed Shaya into the wardrobe. The delicate young man's eyes were half closed as he lay limply in the clothes. His honey-colored hair fell under his eyes. His grayish-purple eyes were still hazy like rain. Wei Bai felt that the system must have given him the #1 beauty medal. This was the #1 beauty she wanted, not the cute girl next door. Even if she was the cutest girl in the world, she was just cute. Was she not enough to act cute in the previous world? Was she going to continue acting cute in this world? Footsteps came from outside, and the aura of light was unusually strong. Wei Bai immediately squeezed into the wardrobe and closed it directly. She treated the young man behind her as a corpse and sat on his lap without thinking much. The wardrobe was too crowded. She closed the door and leaned back for comfort. Her thin and petite body nestled perfectly in the young man's arms. A slight heartbeat sounded in Wei Bai's ears. She raised her eyebrows. He was really alive. But was there not enough magic potions? Why didn't he move? He had consciousness, heartbeat. He was a living person. Wouldn't it be better if he didn't move? That way, no matter how she dealt with him, he wouldn't be able to escape. Just as Wei was plotting to tempt the youth behind her. Shaya's half-lowered line of sight just happened to fall into her loose robe, where half of her collarbone was faintly discernible. She seemed to be very scared. She suppressed her breathing and blew. He didn't feel. He had always hated anyone's body temperature, because he found this was the first time he actually felt that a person's aura was exceptionally pleasant to smell. #1 beauty medal, delicate, soft, easy to push. She had fair skin, a beautiful face, and a sweet aura. Most importantly, anyone who saw him would love him. Under the influence of the powerful metal, even the cold and cruel Rose Duke's heart trembled slightly. Ding! The male lead's favorability is -5. Wei Bai was expressionless. If it dropped, it dropped. If it rose, it rose. This time, the target let her smell the scent of a capricious ghost. Outside the door, 2 figures wearing white robes appeared. The white robes were embroidered with the church's golden border. One of them bowed his head respectfully and was about to say something. The taller figure suddenly bowed his head towards the room. Then, without saying anything, he turned around and left. The follower behind him followed with a puzzled face. After walking for a long time, the follower asked, "Lord Bishop, the room is obviously filled with the aura of black magic. Why didn't you search?" The bishop stopped. "There is the aura of that Lord's light magic." The follower paused and suddenly revealed a look of shock. Then, he lowered his head in fear and didn't dare to ask again. // To facilitate your next reading, you can click on comma. Chapter 2489. The bishop reached out and pressed the magic bracelet. There was a hint of awe in his cold eyes under the hood. "Although I don't know why that lord would appear in a room with the aura of black magic, this is not something we can ask." The follower immediately said, "Yes, I understand." The bishop said, "When we go back, report the situation to the Pope. Before we get further instructions, no one is to disturb that place." He took a few steps forward. The bishop frowned and felt unsafe. "No, don't disturb the area around that house. That lord didn't just cultivate light magic. If someone else touched black magic, it might violate the taboo of the Church of Light. But if it was that lord, then everything had to make way for him. After all, even the Church of Light was built by his family. Even the current pope was a subordinate of the Rose family. Wei hid in the cupboard. Because it was a little long, she couldn't bear the boredom. She began to yawn. Then she leaned against Xiaoya's body and rubbed against his chest like an obedient kitten. She was extremely obedient and curled up in his warm embrace. She closed her eyes and seemed to be asleep. The beautiful and exquisite youth was like a puppet, motionless, but his grayish-purple eyes were calmly half-closed, staring deeply at the audacious Wei Bai. Although he didn't reject her aura, it didn't mean that he liked to be touched like this. He thought of a fanatical lunatic in the past. To touch him, she even risked her life. Although she only touched the corner of his clothes, she was hid away by his magic. But it still disgusted him enough. In the future, he wouldn't even wear clothes like this. If he was in his normal state, this little witch would dare to touch him. It was faster to dream. The Duke of Rose's cold eyes were filled with cold ridicule. When the people of the Church of Light broke into this house, they would capture the little witch. Bringing her back to the Church of Light and drinking the Pope's holy water would probably speed up the refinement of the dragon race's power. At that time, he would personally go to the prison cell and beat this licentious and shameless little witch to death. In the end, as he waited, he already smelled the familiar aura of light magic. It was at least the aura of a bishop. That's great, he must know him. The aura of black magic in this room was so obvious that the bishop would definitely be able to tell. Then he left. Xiao was silent. He actually left just like that. As a bishop, he couldn't even see through a room of black magic. Could it be that he was too lax in his assessment? Or was he too brazen in using underhanded means? The little witch didn't seem to know that the people outside had left. She even curled up in his arms, trembling with fear, as if she was trying to get some protection. If she wasn't asleep, that's what he convinced himself. She actually fell asleep at such a dangerous time. Xiaoya's eyes were even colder, cold like a purple gem, circulating with a breathtaking brilliance. He was actually hiding in a shabby and cheap wardrobe. He lay there like a corpse, holding a witch in his arms, unable to move. This was definitely the most embarrassing moment of his life. Just as Xiaoya's impression of this place dropped further, and his favorability was about to drop again, a soft sobbing sound, like the murmur of a kitten, sounded softly in front of his chest. Xiao couldn't move his gaze. He only felt that this soft and weak cry tickled his ears. "Why are you crying? Are you that scared? I've never seen such a weak, cowardly, and harmless witch." / for convenience next time, you can click on the button below to record this reading record. Chapter 2490. Thinking of the hundreds of witches he killed, all of them were evil and crazy. How could there be such a pitiful little witch? She was actually afraid of being caught and burned to death. He thought that witches were a group of lunatics who refined black magic and treated accepting their fate as a straw. After all, lunatics were not afraid of death. Even if they died, they would drag everyone down with them. Xiao listened to the little kitten-like crying, gently ringing. The moist temperature soaked through his clothes. It seemed to soak through the tip of his cold heart. In his cold eyes, there was finally a trace of helplessness. The people of the church had left. What was there to be afraid of? Really too weak. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 0. Wei Wei Bai, because this body was tired, waiting was too boring, so she fell asleep directly. In her sleep, she hugged her head and howled miserably, crying bitterly. Why is the number 1 beauty so ugly, giving me hope and making me despair? A corpse is prettier than me. Do I still have a face to go out? I want to change my face for plastic surgery. The system watched the favorability turn to 0, and then looked at the host who did not forget the strategy in her sleep. Really dedicated. She could still pretend to be pitiful in her sleep. Too admirable. Wei Wei Bai woke up, feeling nothing about the favorability turning to 0. The headstrong ghost's corpse. The favorability increased inexplicably. It was normal. After all, so many perverts, so many brainless targets. She was already calm about this kind of strategy target. She was not a newcomer to strategy. She was an old fox. What was the point of being surprised? Just muddle along. She was still waiting to muddle through one plane and return to the real world to increase her life points to 80 years. As for the 30 life points from the plane reward, forget about it. It was more than that. So every time she woke up in the real world, even the system was too lazy to calculate how much life points she got. How much life points were deducted? Anyway, the big head was not here. Of the plane rewards, only the side rewards could barely be used. No, it was not useful now. Whether it was the cute seller last time or the number 1 beauty this time. It made her feel the deep malice and stinginess of the autonomous system. Wei Wei Bai dragged Xia out of the wardrobe with great effort and put him back on the chair. His long legs were casually placed under the chair, and his honey-colored hair curled around his cheeks. He didn't close his eyes, but he couldn't really raise them either. Her clothes were a little messy, and she looked like she had been ravaged. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her nose to make sure she didn't have a nosebleed. Then she turned her back on him and paced calmly. How was he going to attack a corpse, and a corpse with consciousness at that? There was a problem with the magic potion, so he could not move. Actually, this wasn't a big deal. After all, it was fine as long as he was conscious. If he could move, she was worried that he would run away. After all, it seemed like there was a problem with the magic potion. As a result, he did not feel that he was the witch's servant at all. The failure of a potion recipe had many repercussions. For example, if a person was resurrected but was disobedient and ran away, or he could stab the witch to death. Wei Wei Bai felt that this corpse's favorability was probably from the time he stabbed the witch to death. It was better not to move. But this was her thinking. The original owner's character setting had to be maintained. For example, revenge or hatred with the Holy Church. Anyway, she had to pretend to be pitiful. In addition to her current appearance, she was a delicate and pitiful girl. Pretending to be pitiful was the most believable appearance. Chapter 2491. Moreover, she was very familiar with the skill of pretending to be pitiful. She was simply a skilled technician. She didn't even need to think. She could just pretend and be pitiful. Bai Weiwei calmly finalized the issue of her character, as well as the route of the follow-up strategy. As for whether he was from the Church of Light in his previous life, this wasn't important because he would lose his memory when he was resurrected. Right? Amnesia. Weiwei Bai's eyes lit up. Amnesia was good. She was also very familiar with amnesia. Weiwei Bai felt that this plane was absolutely stable. Wasn't he in a state of amnesia? Then, she could just fill in the blanks in his memory. For example, he loved her so much that it moved the heavens and earth. Weiwei Bai secretly clenched her fists and silently exclaimed. She had already seen countless favorability hugging her. She adjusted her state and reached out to pull at her face. Her eyes twitched a few times. Then, She turned her head and trotted over to stretch out her hands. Shaya lowered his eyes and was still secretly competing with the power of the dragon race. Suddenly, he heard hurried footsteps. In his line of sight, he saw the little witch open her hands and pounce over, hugging his neck. Then, she sat directly on his lap. With tears in her eyes, her slender fingers lifted his chin. The youth's beautiful face was raised, but her face didn't leave. This was the advantage of having a small face. Even at this distance, it was cute. Bai Weiwei's tears dripped down her cheeks. Shaya, I love you. Even if you become a corpse for me, I will give up everything to resurrect you. Shaya, what the hell? Who became a corpse for you? No, how did she know his name? Weiwei Bai cried sadly. We used to be so in love, but that bastard Church of Light wanted to kill our witch. You rebelled against the Church of Light just to save me. I'm sorry. Shaya, what the hell? Who rebelled against the Church of Light? When did this happen? Why didn't he know? Bai Weiwei wept, heartbroken, and kissed his lips. Shaya continued to be in a daze. Weiwei Bai's eyes were red, and there were traces of tears on her delicate face. Her amber eyes reflected the face of a beautiful young man. It was as if he was really her one and only. They were lovers in love. Damn it, if it weren't for the fact that he couldn't move, he would have strangled her to death. A deep storm appeared in Shaya's grayish-purple eyes. He stared at Weiwei Bai's face. A lovely girl, sitting on his lap, her beautiful face was like the sweetest candy. The way she looked when she was crying was breathtakingly beautiful. The more he looked at him, the more he couldn't bring himself to hate him. Weiwei Bai rubbed her eyes. The corners of her eyes were red, and there was a charming seduction in her purity. Her eyelashes trembled, and her eyes were filled with love. Shaya suddenly thought of those disgusting zealots of his. Could it be that this little witch was actually one of his fanatical admirers? That was why he used a magic potion to revive him after picking him up. Just to satisfy her perverted love? He hated fanatical admirers the most. He hated it the most. Once again, Shaya was in a daze. That's why these admirers are really disgusting. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu. // Chapter 2492. Weiwei Bai wanted to show that they were real lovers. She was worried that he would notice something was wrong, so she tried her best to create the atmosphere of a passionate love between the two of them. But he couldn't move now. Other than kissing him, he couldn't do anything else. So she kissed him with all her might. It would be a waste not to kiss him. Shaya's mind went from being muddled to feeling disgusted to numb. As expected of a witch, she was evil. So shameless, still so shameless. A faint blush suddenly appeared on the beautiful boy's pale face. It was like a pink rose growing in the snow. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased by 2. Weiwei Bai. It seemed that he was not only a willful person, but also a stingy person. 2 points, 2 points, 2 points. Don't you feel embarrassed? Weiwei Bai sat in Shaya's arms and made up some stories about their love. She said that he chased her back then. He bought her a lot of jewelry with all his money. Weiwei Bai. And for me, you went to 3 towns to buy honey cakes for me. Weiwei Bai. For me, you didn't even look at princesses, dukes, and daughters. He didn't look at them, but it had nothing to do with her. Weiwei Bai. And you would play the piano and sing love songs for me in the middle of the night. Weiwei Bai shyly held her face. In the end, I still agreed to your proposal. Rose Duke, who only knew how to kick women away when he saw them. Who proposed? Was he the kind of person who would propose? Ridiculous. The little witch chattered for a long time. Shaya felt that he was about to fall asleep. A kiss gently landed on his forehead. The girl's voice was sweet, gentle, and soft. Although I know you can't hear me, I was still worried that you would be bored if you couldn't move, so I had to say more to you. Under Shaya's eyelashes, his cold purple eyes contain a hint of coldness. But because of this sentence, he trembled. In his line of sight, the little witch's face was soft and clean under her reddened eyes. What was even cleaner was her sweet smile that was the same color as her eyes. It was like honey, even though the words he said were all nonsense and preposterous. However, there was no smell of blood, nor was there any aura of black magic. Other than feeding him the resurrection magic potion, he did not do anything else. Even if she was a witch, she would be too clumsy to know anything. She didn't know magic, she didn't know how to dodge, and she definitely wasn't an evil little witch. Wei Wei Bai said a lot of sweet nothings. There are also many fictional stories. She tried her best to make Shaya think that they were lovers. It was natural that her favorability towards him didn't increase much. After all, a person with amnesia didn't mean that they were mentally retarded. During dinner, Wei Wei Bai boiled some meat soup and fed it to the boy. After all, they had to maintain the image of lovers. She had to treat him better. Otherwise, he would doubt her words even more. It didn't matter that Xia didn't need to eat. The magic energy in his body could maintain the state of his body. But when the little witch carefully blew on the meat soup and then fed him little by little with a small spoon, he actually didn't spit it out. Not being able to move didn't mean that he couldn't reject food. He still had this kind of physical instinct. The little witch chuckled and muttered, "There's no food at home again. I'll make more herbs to sell tomorrow. I won't let you starve." Shaya stared at the smile on her face, his eyes deep. After dinner, Wei Wei Bai took out hot water and gently wiped Shaya's face, hands, and feet. He had just grown out and was clean. Bathing would wait until tomorrow. This was the first time that Shaya was served so rudely. His face was red from being wiped, because the weather was cold and it was snowing at night. Wei Wei Bai lit the fire and dragged Shaya's chair to the side of the fire. Worried that he was cold, she even squatted in front of him and held his hands with her hands. "When I sell the herbs and have money, I'll buy gloves for you." Shaya's body was still in severe pain. After all, the conflict and digestion of power was not easy. He had always been used to enduring and was also used to silently digesting in the dark. In the past, if someone dared to disturb him when he was digesting power, he had the heart to kill. The little witch pressed his cold fingers to her face and revealed a sweet smile. She said, "You won't be cold like this, Shaya." Fanatical, humble, and pitiful, Shaya coldly sneered in his heart. Admiring him so much. Really annoying. Ding, the male lead's favorability is 7. Chapter 2493. Wei Wei Bai said that she was poor, and she was really poor. To make witches slaves, she did everything she could. All the precious things that could be returned were exchanged for gold coins, and then thrown to Shaya. Wei Wei Bai flipped through the formula again and again. It was impossible for a dead person to have memories after being resurrected by herbs, because the effect of magic medicine was limited. Creating a complete soul was the domain of God. It was not the ability of witches. In this world, if a person wanted to be resurrected, all kinds of methods had sequelae. The witch's magic medicine was already one of the best methods of resurrection. But this kind of resurrection was at the cost of depriving the dead of all consciousness when they were alive. That was, once the witch's slave woke up, his mind would be blank. But his personality would have a high chance of being preserved. This was also the reason why witches' slaves would sometimes kill witches. Because some people, even if they lost their memories, their personalities were still so violent. Even if they lost their memories, they would not wait for others. Of course, they would clash with witches, but it was more because witches were too cruel. It led to the slaves' counterattack. All witches would have many restrictions and contracts to restrain their slaves. There was a drug in the magic medicine. This drug damaged the slave's brain and made him obedient. The effect was unknown. Anyway, Wei Wei Bai looked at the formula and a bunch of cases. Then, he stealthily observed his servant. The exquisite young man was more attractive than the most gorgeous rose. Just like the most expensive doll made by a supermaster, which could only be called a work of art. But it was also a doll. It could not move. and the favorability was so up and down. Maybe his brain was really a little damaged? Wei Bai felt that the goal of this plane was to conquer. It was a little miserable. Even if Xiaya could move and had a damaged brain, he could only go to the streets to beg. Xiaya, who was silently digesting the power and unable to move, suddenly felt a chill on his back. It felt like someone was cursing him. Wei Bai struggled to use the data given by the system and carefully mixed the herbs. It was beautifying. She always believed that beautifying things were the most popular. Women as young as 7 years old and as old as 1 foot in the grave all loved beauty. Although it could only improve one's skin, it could also be modified with herbs, especially for a newbie like her. If he used too much strength, the herbs would be destroyed. Fortunately, the materials were the cheapest. 1 iron coin could buy 10 sets of materials. He had to destroy at least 7 or 8 sets of materials before he could retrieve 1 set. Wei Bai looked at the green liquid and felt that it was especially green. She put down the portion that she had finished with great difficulty and looked up to see Xiaya sitting quietly on the chair. He wondered if his but would rot if he sat like this. Wei Bai saw a light coming from the window. She ran over, her petite body dragging the chair with great effort. Step by step, he dragged him to the window where there was light. Xiaya had been watching the little witch coldly from the sidelines, watching how she made the herbs. Although the materials were not poisonous, but the witch's formula was particularly strange. In their hands, good materials could turn into something like a plague, even if they weren't poisonous. She was still a witch. Was he using poison to harm others? At first, Xiaya looked on coldly, and then, forget it, even if it was poison. With the little witch's crappy modulation method, it was estimated that she wouldn't succeed until the end of time. The more vicious the thing, the more difficult it was to make. Her fingers were shaking so badly when she put the materials in. Chapter 2494. She's worse than an ordinary person. How did she become a witch? Xiaya's eyes were half closed, his eyes cold and beautiful. Then, in his line of sight, the little witch suddenly ran over again. Is she going to kiss him again? In the end, she actually ran behind him. So it's not. A trace of strangeness appeared in Xiaya's heart. What was he expecting? Why was he thinking about whether she would kiss him or not? Suddenly, his chair moved. He was dragged bit by bit, rubbing against the floor behind him, making a creaking sound. The little witch's soft gasps were very obvious. What was she going to do? Before Xiaya could be puzzled, the warm sun had already fallen on him. Wei Bai put him in a place where there was light. After all, it was winter now. The winter here was particularly cold, the kind of cold when it snowed heavily. She was also poor and didn't have much money to buy firewood. That little bit of firewood would be used at night. Although this plane was very simple, it was also particularly bitter. Wei Bai felt that she was going to become a little girl selling matches. It was almost time. After all, she was about to go to the streets and sell things. Compared to matches, the beautifying skincare water was definitely more popular. Wei Bai was thinking about how to make money while unconsciously taking care of Xiaya. The target of the strategy was amnesia, brain problems, and vegetative state. Her strategy was to take care of him, kiss him, and brainwash him that they were lovers. The favorability rose to 7 and stopped moving. Wei Bai reckoned that there wasn't enough time. She waited for the two of them to waste too much time. Even if Xiaya was suspicious, the two of them were not lovers now. She just had to pretend that she didn't know that he was awake and still take care of him and love him. He could only see her. After a long time, he could not love her. So Wei Bai looked at him with a smile and adjusted his sitting position. She also covered his thighs with the only woolen blanket. When she was seriously pressing the woolen blanket for him, her big brown braids fell below her shoulders, and the braids were tied with a simple hairband. There was not a single flower or a little decoration. Even the poorest girl always had some cheap decorations in her hair, not to mention aristocratic families. Nowadays, the style of banquets in the upper class was all luxurious. Those women were too embarrassed to go out without jewelry and flowers on their heads. The little witch carefully adjusted her position so that he could get the best sunlight. Then she went to get a woman's scarf, which was bright red. Shaya felt warm all over. Actually, he didn't need it, and he didn't feel cold. When the little witch wrapped the scarf around his neck, her fingers touched his neck. That trace of coolness swept across his skin. She was very cold. Moreover, he was always wearing a shabby robe with only a simple inner shirt underneath. In this kind of weather, it was lucky that she didn't get sick from wearing such clothes. After Wei Wei Bai was done, she couldn't help blowing on her fingers. Her fresh and tender fingers were all red from the cold. Her tender white skin was also red from a cold, just like sweet cherries. It had even been frozen. Shaya's face was expressionless as his grayish-purple eyes stared fixedly at her. The little witch jumped, and the end of her whip moved with her. Then she thought of something and turned to him with a smile. Shaya, after I make the herbs, I can sell them for money. Then I'll buy you new clothes. Shaya, I don't want the money from selling witches' poison. Then he heard the little witch muttering to herself. These herbs are not poisonous, and they can also protect the skin. Women like them. Chapter 2495. Shaya, no, I definitely can't sell it. If I sell this kind of thing, I'll be targeted by the patrol. Moreover, the skincare products are already full. Even the poor have the habit of buying them in small shops. So, if she didn't have a special channel, she would rely on selling things on the streets. Not only would she not be able to sell it, she might even be arrested and locked up in prison. And a prison cell was a hellish existence for a girl. After the little witch finished talking to herself, she said energetically, "Then I'll go make the potion. You can bask in the sun first. When I'm done, I'll tell you a story." She was afraid that the vegetable would be bored. She used all her patience and thoughtfulness to ensure that he would be obedient, compared to the other planes that were either dead or alive. Other than being a nanny, this plane was simply heaven. Shaya sat on the chair, extremely quiet. Previously, he could see the little witch in his line of sight. But after she changed her position, he could only see the sunlight outside the window. At first, he didn't feel anything. After all, he could still hear the little witch's footsteps running around. There was also the sound of materials being destroyed. Occasionally, he could see a corner of her tattered robe, so he still felt lively. However, that sound slowly disappeared. First, the sound of footsteps disappeared. The little witch should be sitting at the table, trying her best to make the unsellable, beautifying potion with her clumsy technique. So she stopped walking. But the sound of making the potion slowly stopped. There was no sound. In the empty room, there was one less person's voice. It was actually so quiet. Shaya sat indifferently, as if he didn't care. In the past, he could stay in the barren land alone for a year without feeling anything. In the barren land, except for the occasional storm. Basically, there were no creatures and no sound. That place drove many people crazy, but he felt very good. He never liked excitement. It was better for the little witch to be silent. He liked silence the most. The sun gradually disappeared, and it was dark. There were no candles lit in the room. The black room was even colder. Shouldn't the little witch come over and push a chair for him? After all, there was no sunlight. Moreover, no matter how frugal she was, she knew to light an oil lamp when it was dark. The Rose Duke, who was never afraid of the dark and restless, looked coldly at the window. Nothing bad will happen, right? After all, it was not unheard of for people to be poisoned to death while making potions. At this thought, Shaya's eyelashes fluttered, and his eyes regained their strength. His lazy eyelids finally opened bit by bit. At this moment, his hazy, grayish-purple eyes were dyed with a stunning radiance. It was clear and cold, replacing the hazy death aura. Her long eyelashes fluttered upward like the wings of a butterfly. The power of the Dragon Clan was still clashing with his power, but he had digested some of it, and at least he had the strength to move his eyes. Shaya struggled to move his eyes and found that if he didn't turn his head, his vision was limited. He could only see the corner of the shabby table. There was no sign of the little witch. A slight change of expression appeared on Shaya's excessively exquisite face. This was not easy for him. Every time he moved, he would drain his limited magic power. He pursed his lips with difficulty and moved his fingers. As if he was testing the waters, he suppressed the power of the dragon race and used some of his own power. Intense pain invaded his bones. It made his muscles tremble a little. Shaya took a slow breath, and a small sweat appeared on his forehead. His honey-colored hair stuck to his forehead, and his fair face was flushed with fatigue. Chapter 2496. In the darkness, the young man finally got up slowly. His beautiful fingertips unhurriedly caught the blanket that had slipped from his knees. The warm blanket was thick, but one could see that it had been there for a long time. Shaya's cold and delicate face, even if he endured severe pain, did not change a bit. He had the noble's reservedness and forbearance, even if he suffered great pain. He also had to maintain an elegant posture. Shaya slowly got up and finally turned around. Some of the scattered hair on his forehead fell under his eyes. He did not waste his energy to comb his hair, but looked at the table through the gaps in his hair. On the long mahogany table, there were all kinds of messy materials. In the middle of the table, a small figure was lying on her stomach. The wide robe slipped off her shoulders. The female's underwear was thin, and the white thin shirt was a bit big. When the girl was lying on her stomach, some of the messy braids fell on her thin back. Because of his posture, his extremely fragile neck was exposed, as well as the weak lines of his shoulders. In the darkness, the young man stared at her expressionlessly, as if to see if she was pretending to be asleep. He supported the back of the chair with one hand. It could be seen that his posture was strained, but his back was still straight, making his figure more slender and pleasing to the eye. He seemed to be gathering strength. He waited for a while. Then slowly, step by step, he walked over. When he came to the table, he reluctantly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Snap! The room suddenly lit up. It was not an oil lamp, nor a candle. It was light magic. Shaya used a little bit of magic, and his breath was a bit uneven. However, his snow-white face was still so cold that not a single trace of emotion could be seen. The little witch was lying on her stomach, and half of her face that was not covered by her arms appeared in the light. Her delicate eyebrows were tightly knitted, and there were traces of haggard on her thin, white face. Her lips were bright red, but somewhat dry. These days, she had been taking care of him. She never took care of herself. At night, she would get up from time to time and tuck in the quilt for him. She was worried that there would be a gap in his quilt, and he would be blown by the cold wind. Shaya stood quietly in front of the table, his eyes still cold. He thought for a while, then stretched out his hand, and his slender fingers fell on her neck. With just a little strength, he could break her neck. Killing witches was his mission, as well as his habit. But when his fingertips touched her skin, he realized how cold she was. It was so cold that it felt like a corpse. Shaya's fingertips trembled, and he suddenly retracted them. His movements were too big, and his face paled. With both hands on the table, he could barely stand. This time, taking the risk to go to the Dragon Clan's holy land could really be a mistake. He was still too young to control the power of the dragon race's holy dragon skeleton. It was too difficult. However, there were too many filthy matters in the family, which also affected his interests. If he didn't quickly stand at the top of the Empire's power, in that case, it was still not certain who would obtain the authority of the clan. Shaya coldly spat out a name. If those who knew were here, they would definitely be shocked, because he had coldly called out the king's name in an unusually contemptuous tone. Shaya looked at the little witch, his purple eyes so cold that it made people tremble. If you're so poor, don't learn how to help others. They deserve to die of poverty, cold, and starvation. Shaya stretched out his hand again. His fair fingertips were like snow on a mountain peak, more exquisite and cold. His fingertips lightly fell on her hair. A few wisps of magic fell into her body. Her skin warmed up again, and the tight frown on her face eased a little. Shaya's pair of beautiful and clear purple eyes showed a trace of fluctuation. When Wei Bai was woken up by the system, the room was dark. The delicate youth was still sitting quietly on the chair. The woolen blanket was still meticulously covering his legs. But the favorability had become 10/mobile. Chapter 2497. Wei Wei Bai's first reaction was that her care had worked. He might even start to believe that the two of them were lovers. So the favorability climbed up. It didn't climb up, it just climbed up by 3 points. The system suddenly said, "Just now your doll got up." Wei Wei Bai asked, "He can move?" The system said, "Yes." He seemed to be forcing it. He walked a few steps, and his kidneys were weak. "Then he walked in front of you," Wei Wei Bai chuckled. "Did he kiss me when he walked in front of me?" Wasn't this the usual routine? Although it was only 10 points, it was still a favorable impression. He kissed her secretly, then the favorability would secretly increase. The system said, "No, he walked in front of you and reached out to strangle your neck." In the end, he gave up because he didn't have enough energy. Wei Wei Bai, the system said, "I heard that witches are slaves. Sometimes they would kill witches and become masters themselves." Wei Wei Bai, the system said, "If he could really move, would he chop you up?" Wei Wei Bai, the system said, "So you don't have to work so hard to be good to him or to poison him and make him stupid." It didn't finish its sentence. Wei Wei Bai, who always had a tacit understanding with the system, had already reacted. She immediately nodded, showing an extremely deep expression. "Okay, I got it." The system was relieved. After all, it watched the host rush the work of a caretaker every day. There was good food left for the male lead. He drank his own soup. There was a warm blanket for the male lead. He froze like a dog. He felt that it was better to change the target of the strategy. If this continued, the strategy would not be completed. He would probably die from malnutrition if Yeshuan didn't insist on following. There was a problem with his data book, and he couldn't provide the host with detailed information for reference. He couldn't give the host any cheat. The host wouldn't be in such a bad state. If he knew, he wouldn't have bought the #1 beauty. He should have bought the light immunity. After all, with the light immunity, the host would be able to get rid of the dark aura on the witch, to be able to avoid all kinds of detection by the Church of Light. In that case, he wouldn't have to scrimp on food when he went out of work. The system felt that the next time it saw something like the #1 beauty, etc., I must never tell the host. Women are irrational for the sake of beauty. The world's strongest man and the world's most beautiful woman were in front of the host. The host would only choose the #1 beauty. While the system was feeling heartache, Wei Wei Bai was already happily running to light the oil lamp. Then he began to light the wood for the stove with difficulty. It took a lot of effort to warm up half of the house. Wei Wei Bai lifted her overlong robe and lightly ran in front of Xiaya. She reached out and gently cupped Xiaya's face. Xiaya's purple eyes turned gloomy. Only then did Wei Wei Bai see clearly that he was indeed conscious. But usually, he was too good at pretending. It was hard to tell. She pretended not to see anything. Worry appeared on her face. Her beautiful honey eyes were filled with heartache. "Xiaya, are you cold?" "Sorry, I fell asleep and let you be in the wind." Xiaya, her fingers were still cold. Although he gave her some magic to keep her warm, the time was limited, and he couldn't make it too obvious. If she woke up and noticed traces of light magic, she would probably be suspicious. So before she woke up, the magic disappeared and her skin was cold again. The button. Chapter 2498. Xiaya was expressionless, not even the slightest expression or movement. But the girl didn't care whether she was cold or not. Her fingers were incomparably presumptuous as they touched his face. The girl's breath contained an icy aura with a clean and cold fragrance. It was like a rose frozen in the snow. It was like a red cherry that was still in crushed ice. No matter what, it smelled good, and it didn't arouse any disgust at all. Xiaya was used to the extravagance of nobles since he was young, and he could smell all kinds of artificial perfumes. He couldn't say whether it was annoying or not, but he was used to it. But her breath made all the smells he had smelled in the past become disgusting and unbearable. The little witch didn't wear perfume. How could a person's body smell so perfect? Xiaya didn't know what his mind was thinking. He had already thought of schemes the dragon race, the holy dragon skeleton, the power transfer to the little witch is annoying, the little witch is very poor, the little witch's body fragrance, the little witch. Why were they all little witches? Had he been here for too long and been brainwashed by the little witch? If he didn't know that there was no trace of black magic on him, he would suspect that the little witch had drugged him. Her cold fingers moved down little by little, gently sliding down from his face. The coolness and the slightly warm temperature of his skin had a special reaction. A numb and unfamiliar touch gently rushed from his skin to his senses. Shaya could hardly control it. His long and thick eyelashes trembled, and his clear purple eyes had a trace of the same light. Just as her fingers were touching his neck, Lu Jinyan's lips parted. Her fingertips touched his collarbone, but stopped. Wei Wei Bai's eyebrows relaxed, as she couldn't help but smile. "You're not cold. Your skin is still warm." In the flickering candlelight, the girl's smile was extremely pure. Shaya's gaze was frozen as he stared at her smiling face. The little witch didn't know that he was looking at her. She ran behind the chair and dragged it with effort, little by little dragging him towards a fire. Her slender arms had no strength. Her panting was so obvious. Even her footsteps were staggering. However, she never overturned the chair. Shaya lowered his eyes. His indifferent face was still like an exquisite sculpture. In the light and shadow, there was a kind of lifeless beauty. He didn't seem to care about her at all. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 15. Wei Wei Bai was dragging a chair. The system exasperatedly said, "Wow, this guy wants to kill you. You should break his brain instead of continuing to be nice to him." Wei Wei Bai chuckled. "I'm such a kind and beautiful number one beauty. How could I do such a bad thing? Am I the kind of person who would make a target stupid just for favorability?" Bai Wei Wei was resolute. "I'm not, Stop praising yourself. If you keep praising yourself, I'm going to throw up." Wei Wei Bai. If his brain isn't working well, his favorability would be unstable. It's fine as long as his brain is clear. Besides, we don't have any deep hatred for each other. It was just a moment of impulse to kill him. There were so many people who wanted to kill her. She was used to dealing with them. Moreover, many of the targets really did have deep hatred for each other. But this time, Shaya was much simpler. His mind was blank. Perhaps his personality was very cautious when he was alive, so even if he lost his memory, he was still very careful. He didn't believe her words. // You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.